the happenings around the world, especially as it regards media narratives and portrayal of different uh, interests. I would use that word. Yeah. The different interests that are playing, that are pulling. Okay, like if we come to Africa, which is essentially our concern, and we focus on how the narratives have been, you will quickly recognize, okay, these very, very intentional attempts at uh, painting or portraying a particular picture. Now, we are encouraged to embrace democracy, okay? And it is reported that they do everything possible to encourage democracy in and around Africa, and of course the rest of the world, where they still have people that are listening to them. When we now have an election that is clearly not an election that is clearly anything but democratic, what do we observe? We observe the same people acknowledging and endorsing, okay, doing everything within their power to legitimize a process that was clearly not the will of the people. Even though agencies that work for them have written a different report saying that, oh no, this is anything but an election, but they'll still carry on. Now, when voices like African Stream, when voices like David, okay, when people that know better start pointing out some of these things, we begin to see the same people that are supposedly championing freedom of speech. I don't know whether you saw the one that they signed with Abi, that they released a statement with the government in Nigeria today, saying
Yes,
that they
I
stand
saw
for
that.
free speech. I mean, yeah, so of course, looking at that thing, that statement can only be, it is only valid if it is a point that will be read by Bright in his Night of a Thousand Laughs, or if it will be presented by the other comedians that we have, Macaron.
He can speak more on the topic. Thank you for joining us, David. I was already assumed that you were asleep. Yeah, so Onyeka, please go ahead.
Yeah, you need to understand the mindset of these people in Nigeria. Okay, now when they speak, they expect you to take whatever they have said as the gospel truth, the same way you people swallow your Sky Daddy narratives. Okay, they expect you to swallow whatever that comes out of their liners' mouths. Okay, I mean anything they say. Now, you pushing back always makes them, they don't know how to respond because it is not something that they are used to. They are not used to Africans pushing back. But unfortunately, for them, they are dealing with a different and young generation of Africans that are more informed and more enlightened. Okay. There was to highlight the hypocrisy of these people. Forgive me that I am always going back to election. If you read the reports of one of their propaganda media, The Economist, read their report on the Venezuelan election. The same people, if you read their reports on the Nigerian election in Venezuela, they were saying, oh no, this person did not win. They were categorical and they were right. Yeah, the election was rigged, blah, 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 blah. And I was not asking myself, so it is possible for these people to know that elections was not free and fair. But when it came to Nigeria's election, oh, they certified it as free. Hypocrisy. Thank you. Thank you so much. Let's allow them.
All right, okay. All right, David, welcome and thank you for joining. It's a pleasure to have you here. So, David, can you hear me?
Yes, I can.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so I think we can start now and let's start with the official introduction. So thank you, David, for joining us and welcome to Africa TV on X. We're majorly on Clubhouse where we create conversations that are related to Nigeria and Africa as a whole. But right now we're also on X and we're trying to speak to a larger audience. And I think it's also a major honor or a great honor to have David with us. He's been with us on Clubhouse before and he accepted to grace us with his presence today. So in recent weeks, we've had like a significant controversy that has emerged around the ban of African streams on major social media platforms like Meta, formerly known as Facebook and YouTube. And this action has been linked to statements that were made by the U.S. Secretary of State Anthony Blinken, who accused African streams of disseminating Kremlin propaganda without any evidence. And in spite of this accusation, and I think that this accusation is indicative of a broader geopolitical tension that is currently going on. We have the rise of the Alliance of Sahel States, popularly known as AES, which comprises of Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. We're all aware of what happened with Niger and the coup that happened there. And we also know what the ECOWAS response to that military coup that happened under the presidency of Tinubu. So, this kind of shift raises critical questions about, future governance and stability in West Africa, and also, the freedom of of what I say, of African media platforms. And that's why we decided to talk to David, who is a member of African Streams, to kind of like discuss the timeline of events that led to the ban of African Streams on Meta and YouTube to people who are just aware of what's currently going on. So David, please welcome and thank you for gracing us with your presence. So David, can you please highlight like the timelines of events that led to the ban of African Streams on Meta and YouTube?
Okay, so I'll try my best to keep it brief. It's quite this is something that arguably goes back as far back as maybe 2-3 years ago when the platform actually began. But I guess the most recent escalation, you can draw it back to about a month ago, where we got into a bit of a back and forth with the Voice of America. It's not the first time the Voice of America has pulled a stunt like that. So I remember in May, this Kenyan journalist who worked with the Voice of America, her name is Purity Mwambia. She's a central figure in all of this. So she saw a tweet that I put out, where I was responding to a news story, basically saying that the U.S. government was trying to sort of arm twist the Nigerian government into allowing them to open a permanent U.S. military base on Nigerian soil. And I was making the point in that tweet that, in case anyone thinks that the purpose of a U.S. military base in an African country will be to protect African people, that's not the interest of the U.S. on the continent of Africa. The purpose of Africa, according to U.S. foreign policy, which is written down, by the way, you can download for U.S. foreign policy document. The purpose of Africa is to be a source of cheap production inputs to the global economy. So basically, it's an oil well, preferably offshore. It's a mineral mine, and it's a farm for cash crops. And basically, those things are to be extracted as cheaply as possible and then moved to the port for export as quickly as possible. So the people who happen to be living in Africa are like completely beside the point. They're completely secondary. The primary purpose of Africa, according to U.S. foreign policy doctrine, is the resources under the feet of African people. Ergo, if there's a U.S. military base, the purpose of that military base will be to protect the flow of the resources, not to protect the people. That's the point I was making last week. And this lady went and did a quote-unquote fact check on the Voice of America's supposed fact-checking platform, which is called polygraph.info.
I saw that.
Yeah, and it was titled Nigerian Journalist Misleads Millions on X, and yada, 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 yada. So my response was twofold, right? Because this is, if you're familiar with like this sort of ongoing civil war in the media space, there is this thing now where certain people, and they're exclusive, they're always European and American, right? They're always white people. Certain people unilaterally set themselves up and say, okay, we are the fact-checking authorities. Nobody appointed them. There was no meeting where the journalists of the world sat down, and the media establishment of the world sat down and just decided that, okay, so and so is what we have agreed on. These are standards of fact-checking. These are the institutions we have created. Nothing of that sort. It's just a bunch of white people who have money, who just woke up one day and decided we are going to constitute ourselves as self-appointed authorities on this thing called fact-checking. And because they have access to money, they have access to networks and the tech companies, which increasingly are the most powerful entities in media and journalism now. It's no longer media companies. So it's Facebook, it's Twitter, those are actually the most powerful entities in global media right now, right?
Yeah.
TikTok, etc. So they basically went and had a sit down with the owners of these platforms, because these people also have links to the US government, right? These are basically US intelligence cut out. So before I go further, I should actually back up a bit. How global journalism works is that a lot of what the sort of background institutions that provide a lot of funding for journalism, so all these NGOs and whatnot, I'm sure you don't need anybody to tell you that journalism is not a profitable activity. So it always needs funding. And more often than not, it's non-profit funding. So in the global north, i.e., or in both countries, a lot of that funding comes from the government, but it doesn't come directly. So you see Kinikon Ford Foundation, you see Kinikon Open Society Foundation, Kinikon MacArthur. There's always one civil society organization or the other, but the money is coming from the government, right? These guys are intelligence cutouts. They're part of the American and European intelligence community, right? And they are the ones who fund a lot of what is known as global journalism. Now, because of the sheer amount of power and influence these people have, they have been able to now set themselves up as authorities for the whole world, including this thing called fact-checking, where an American living in Washington, D.C., who probably cannot locate your country on a map and cannot pronounce the name of your country correctly, He pronounces Lagos as Lagos. He knows absolutely nothing about Nigeria. Will sit down in Washington, D.C. and say that he's fact-checking you about something you wrote about your own lived reality, right? And then based on the sheer power that he has, you posted that thing on, maybe you shared the link on Facebook or something. Facebook will remove it and label it misinformation and flag your account and flag you because some clueless white guy in DC said so, right? So this is like a brewing issue around the world now where there's a tiny group of people who are getting to sort of determine what should be seen as trusted information or not. And invariably,
the case.
invariably, the problem is that they only know what they know, or they only have whatever agenda they have. And if what you are putting out conflicts with what they think they know or conflicts the agenda they have, you get labeled as misinformation, right? So that was the background to this back and forth that I started having with this lady called Purity in Wambia. So in addition to that, I also made the point to her that, hey, don't think that you're special, that because you appear to be the special African darling of the Voice of America and the State Department now, some of us have been there before you, right? Because as you may or may not know, once upon a time, I used to be very, very much US aligned kind of journalist, right? I was one of those people who was always hanging out at the US Consular General's house in Ikoyi, always invited to one event or the other. I was one of those guys, right?
What
you're going back.
What changed in that aspect? What changed?
What changed was October 2020. That was what changed because when I had to flee Nigeria, I reached out to every contact that I had. My problem wasn't even about taking care of myself or whatnot. My problem was just that the Lekki massacre had happened. I thought that the Lekki massacre, it was like Nigeria's Tiananmen Square. You understand? And it should have been treated with the same sort of priority that Tiananmen Square was treated. Right? Because in the case of Tiananmen Square, where all we heard was that, oh, Chinese authorities massacred so and so number of people. Obviously, in hindsight now, we know a lot of that stuff wasn't even true. They did kill a few people. We actually don't know how many. And a lot of the stories were just sort of made up, right? But based on that perception that existed that this ruthless military institution is murdering young people, students, whatever, there was a lot of global pressure that the US was able to exert on China at the time in 1989. And I thought that October 2020 should have been Nigeria's Tiananmen Square moment where Buhari should have become an international pariah. I spoke to everyone I knew, and the response, like these people that I used to hang out with, were on first name terms. They DM me on Twitter. We exchange memes on WhatsApp and whatnot. And I'm trying to draw attention to this thing that, wait, how is it that this man is still being allowed to fly into your country? Yeah, you're giving him. I remember I think the month after the Lekki massacre, it was November 2020. I think he went to either London or Brussels. I don't remember. But he went to Europe, and they had an official welcome for him. Like they had the carpet on the tarmac, and they like a military sort of welcoming party for him. And I was like, this dude just murdered a bunch of unarmed civilian protesters on the streets in Nigeria. This guy should be in the fucking ICC. Why are you guys rolling out the red carpet for him? And and that was when I started to understand that all that guff about democracy, freedom of speech, human rights, civil rights, all that guff you're always going on about. From their point of view, the only time that is useful for them to actually put any teeth behind is when it serves a geopolitical purpose. So as far as they were concerned, Buhari served a geopolitical purpose for them. So whatever he did, they were never going to call him out on anything. Buhari could have physically murdered, all of us, and they would have been like, oh well, because he served a geopolitical purpose for them, right? They installed him; he was their puppet, right? So because the entire purpose, as I'm sure you're aware now, the entire purpose of that whole Jonathan Must Go project from 2015, which they orchestrated, was that Nigeria must not be allowed to get closer to China. That was the entire purpose of it. So whether Nigeria's economy is growing, is not growing, whether Buhari is killing people, is not killing people, as long as he has achieved that geopolitical purpose, which is keeping Nigeria's drift toward China frozen, so that China doesn't develop a strategic relationship with an African hegemon. And then potentially, we're talking about maybe 2/3 or 3/4 of the world's population, that's Asia and Africa, then sort of uniting and then becoming a real economic and military threat to the self-appointed emperors of the world. It was all the geopolitical calculation. So from their point of view, Buhari was perfectly fine. So whatever Buhari was doing to us, that one wasn't really their business, right? And it was October 2020 that I sort of started realizing that I had been sort of played for a fool. These people I thought were my friends or allies or whatever, these people really ain't shit, So that was when that relationship started breaking. And I was pointing out to this lady, this VOA lady, that look, it's a rite of passage in the career of every successful African journalist that at some point you get courted by a local US embassy. At some point, right? The minute, for whatever reason, your ideological position does not necessarily tally with the foreign policy position of the US State Department, that's when all of a sudden you realize that all you ever were to them was just a disposable item, a useful idiot, basically.
It's mostly American interest first, or geopolitical.
It's not mostly, it's entirely American interest. You are completely expendable. Completely and absolutely expendable. Right? So from their point of view, you're not even a Nigerian. The term Nigeria doesn't mean anything to them. All you are is an African. So whether you're from Nigeria or you're from Angola, they don't really see any, like, the geopolitical purpose of Africa is the same across board. Maybe with the exception of Egypt, because Egypt has obviously a special type of relationship with the US based on proximity to Israel and all of that. But apart from that, the rest of Africa, the purpose is the same. Cheap mining, cheap labor, if possible. And that's it, nothing more. So I was trying to make the point to this Kenyan chick that you are not special, right? Whatever heft you think you have, whatever you think makes you indispensable to these people, it's a marriage of convenience, and it will end, right? So instead of like letting these people use you to do their dirty job, right? Think about what is in your own interest as an African. Obviously, she didn't take it very well. Obviously, it's not my fault that I have a large audience. Because I put this on Twitter, and obviously people went after her and whatnot. I think she didn't take it very well. So the next time they activated her to go after another African voice again, this time, instead of using her own name, she now created this pseudonym, this pen name, Priscilla Mines. So that was what she then used to go after African Stream. Now, the story African Stream had published was a story that was criticizing the actions of the US in Somalia. The story basically stated that the US had killed hundreds, if not thousands, of civilians with drone attacks, which is a fact, it's true, right? The justification that the US had for military intervention in Somalia was that they were going after Al-Shabaab, they're killing terrorists. But just like the way Israel claims that they're killing terrorists, but maybe 90% of the people who die are civilians, right? Which is actually a war crime. That's kind of like what the US was doing and has been doing in Somalia. So they will announce that they've killed a group of 3 terrorists, but 45 people died alongside them. But it's just collateral damage, and that stuff will not get reported. So what that story did was, it was pointing out that the US corporate media will report that those 3 people died, those 3 terrorists died, but the civilians who died don't get reported. And the story made it referenced what's it called, Amnesty International, Human Rights Watch, because those are the people who actually document these things. It's just that they document it and nobody will report it, because again, who cares? It's just a bunch of dead Africans. It might as well be a bunch of dead antelopes, as far as global media is concerned. So it's kind of it's African Stream's job, really, to highlight. I mean, because if you don't highlight the importance of your own lives and those, and that of the people who look like you, who else is going to do it for you?
Exactly, and that was why I actually followed African Stream very closely, because African Stream filled that gap that a lot
Exactly.
of Nigerians and I think a lot of Africans have, which is the interest in geopolitics and actually kind of like connecting what's happening in global geopolitics to what's happening in Africa, and how we can see things from our own perspective and put it out to the world there. So yeah, that was actually really great.
Yeah, but apparently the VOA took great exception to that. So then they then published their quote unquote fact check. And it was like what they call a fact check. Again, it goes back to what I said previously about a group of self-appointed people standing up. What they're saying is absolute nonsense, but because they have money and power, you can't, or they don't expect you to be able to talk back. Right. So they did what they call the fact check. And what the supposed fact check simply restated the claims that they've made before. Like, oh, it was humanitarian intervention, and they only targeted terrorists and whatnot. So we did a rejoinder to that. And the rejoinder basically pointed out that these are not just claims we are making, that we're actually citing reports from Amnesty International. We didn't write, it wasn't even Africans who wrote those reports, right? It was Americans like you. And this stuff is available online, it's on public record. So what do you mean by this didn't happen? Because that's another thing that this sort of government-controlled media in the Western world loves to do. They are the kings, high priests, and world champions of gaslighting. So something happened, something was recorded, right? It's on record that it happened. Everybody knows it happened, and then they will just like ignore it into oblivion. Nobody will report it. Kind of like how, for example, for the past 2 years, it's been public knowledge across most of the continent of Africa that the person who is now the sitting president of Nigeria has all this extensive criminal history in his past, and not a single mainstream American or European platform ever touched it. That's how they are. That's how they operate, right? So Voice of America was trying to like do the same thing again. Basically, African Stream is publishing misinformation, because that's like those two words, misinformation and disinformation. Those are their two favorite words now. So any type of information that is embarrassing to them or that they don't like for whatever reason is labeled misinformation. And then to give it more power, they can probably even label it Russian misinformation, because once you put the word Russian in front, you have added more power to that thing. So once if you say someone is spreading misinformation, the person can sort of fight back and say, no, it's not true, it's actually correct, right? But once you say that it's Russian misinformation, then even if the person tells you that it's correct and shows evidence, as far as they're concerned, in the minds of the audience, once that word Russian has been invoked, then it doesn't matter whether I'm actually telling the truth or not, because in the minds of the audience, it's Russia that is making him do it. It's Russia that is behind it, right? It's a propaganda tactic, and it's something they've always done and they've always been very good at. So we published the rejoinder, and in the rejoinder, we also mentioned that, hey, we know that there's nobody called Priscilla Mines. We know that this is Purity Nwambia, right? But okay, we'll humor you and refer to you by your pen name. And what it was kind of, you should read that rejoinder. Actually, it was quite funny. It was a very pithy put down.
I definitely read that rejoinder and I was having a good laugh. And I think I always look forward to Africa Stream's rejoinder and responses to accusations from platforms like Voice of America or other, would I say, journalists that try to push, Western interests and try to reel you guys in. Most times they're making grammatical mistakes. They're trying to kind of like give orders. You have to respond between
Exactly.
time.
Exactly.
Never really polite. They like to assert dominance, like, you guys are babies, you don't know what you're doing, and we're just here to put you in line. So I definitely see those rejoinders, and they're actually always interesting to read.
That thing you just referenced is very deliberate. that assumption of this position of assumed authority over you, where somebody will come out like from literally 7,000 miles away and will tell you that he's writing about your own lived experience in your own local environment, that you are spreading misinformation and you have 24 hours to respond to clinical. And it's like, what, in your mind, you're reading, you're thinking, who the fuck does this idiot think he is? But you get that all the time if if you're not controlled by these people, and more importantly, if you're putting out any sort of information that contradicts what they consider to be the state line, the official narrative, right? So we put that out, and I think, was it up to a week later? Then we got Secretary Blinken holding that press briefing, and he's like, he first mentioned Redfish, a German platform. I'm not really that familiar with Redfish, but apparently they are sort of pro-Palestinian. They're anti. They don't like the ongoing military campaign in Gaza. So apparently that was their own. Apparently they're supposedly Russian controlled because of that. And then he mentioned African Stream and didn't just mention us by name. Now claimed that we are secretly run by RT. Why that? But there were two reasons that especially pissed me off. Number one,
David, can I play the recording of him and what he said so that people have an understanding that is going on? They missed it. Let me just play it.
Number one, David, across a wide range of social media platforms. What he said so that people. So secretly runs the online platform African Stream across a wide range of social media platforms. Now, according to the outlet's website, African Stream is, and I quote, a pan-African digital media organization based exclusively on social media platforms, focusing on giving a voice to all Africans both at home and abroad. In reality, the only voice it gives is to Kremlin propagandists. RT also secretly runs the online platform African Stream across a wide range of social media platforms. Now, according to the outlet's website, African Stream is, and I quote, a pan-African digital media organization based exclusively on social media platforms, focusing on giving a voice to all Africans both at home and abroad. In reality, the only voice it gives is to Kremlin propagandists.
So that is Secretary Blinken accusing African Stream, which David is a team member of pushing Kremlin propaganda. So David, you were trying to say what actually pissed you off about that accusation. And honestly, when I was watching that video initially, when I saw it, as soon as he finished the first few sentences and then said in reality, I was just like, this guy's again. I'm just wondering what you were thinking initially when this came out. Because for me, it was just funny and it was just stupid. For me, that's how it sounded to me. But I could obviously see how dangerous that tag is. And I started to think about what could possibly be going on and what could possibly happen in the near future if a platform that was following out of interest to what was being put out from a Pan-African perspective, and I thought was really did not have that kind of like a large spread, is being mentioned by this man. So what were you thinking at that point? And what was going through your mind?
So two things. First of all, as you may be aware, when I started working with African Stream last year, I was actually working on site. So presently, I'm not in Kenya. So presently, I'm like a remote team member. But when I started off, I was actually on site. So I was actually in Nairobi with the rest of the team, right? So this is not a group of people that I kind of know or that I'm kind of affiliated with. These are my guys. Like, I know these people, right? We all worked on site. I know the entire team, right? We hold editorial meetings. I know how our editorial line, how our editorial policy, how our stories come together. I know how many of the stories that have been published over the past year have been a result of me personally putting something to the group chat. That even when I'm not doing something this week, because I'm not a regular, like a salaried team member or something, I'm more of a guy who drops in now and again, right? I'm a contributor, right? But just because like I noticed something interesting that I thought would be useful for the platform, and I drop it in the group chat, and then that gets sort of we have a small meeting about it, and then that gets developed into a story, and then we put it out, right? This is a group. I think the oldest person in that team should be Ahmed. That's the founder. I think he should be like 42, 43, right? We're a group of young people basically who have a window on the world and who understand that Africa is not siloed away from the world. So whatever is happening in the world of in the world of global geopolitics also affects Africa, and Africa also affects the world. Everything is connected. Now, to the best of my knowledge, every other continent has more than one, actually, has several platforms that tell a story of the world from their perspective. Right, several. So in India, you have like NDTV, right? In China, you have CGTN. In Japan, you have NHK. Obviously, in Russia, you have RT. In the UK, you have your Sky and BBC. In the US, obviously, your ABC, CNN, Fox News. Australia, you have Sky, Fox. Everybody has their media platforms that tells the story of the world from their perspective. But Africa didn't, and that was the entire purpose behind African Stream, and that's what we actively do on a daily and weekly basis. So for somebody to now, and I know the amount of work that we put into it, right? So for somebody to now come and reduce that incredible amount of work that we do and the amount of effort we put into not just doing work, but pushing it out in a very high quality format, because we understand that a lot of what we are on the first to attempt to do something like this, but what often kills such things is that it's just not very well done. It's very poorly done. So the audience doesn't connect, and it just ends up looking like incompetent Africans, which is like a sort of long-running stereotype or meme, which we try very, very, very hard to avoid. So I know the amount of work that we all put into this thing. And then some guy just stands on the stage somewhere in Washington, D.C., some dude who cannot pronounce our names. He doesn't know anything about us. He's not met us before. He probably just, received a briefing where somebody says this platform is a threat to interest because of so and so and so. I just went out on stage. I just told a blatant lie. I just reduced everything we did to it's, and then he didn't even accuse us of being funded by RT. That would have been bad enough. He said we are secretly run by RT, which is so much worse, because what he was saying wasn't even that, this group of Africans is accepting money from the Kremlin to push out Russian propaganda. That's not what he said. He said we are run by RT, which means that this
directly run. I was like
these guys are actually so fucking stupid that they don't even have the brains to put together this kind of content by themselves. It's the Russians who are doing it. Yeah. And I have, if you're familiar with US history, they've done this thing to Black people so many times. I'm not even going to go back to, because there was a post I did where I mentioned that as far back as the 19th century, or was it the 18th century, people were pushing out, were attempting to push out narratives that any enslaved Africans that tried to flee and attain freedom was mentally ill.
Drapetomania.
Yeah, because the natural position of the African, as God surely intended, was to be enslaved. So if an African wanted to be free, that means that they were suffering from a mental illness called drapetomania. And the solution to drapetomania was regular flogging. Right. So this sort of thinking is very, very deeply baked into the white American psyche. Going into the 20th century, there was a post that I tweeted a few days ago where it was a screenshot of a New York Times article from 1930. And the headline of the post was something along the lines of something like this: the Soviets, that's what the Russians used to be known as. The Soviets are inciting Negroes around the world. The context behind that headline was, at this time, this was in the 1930s, which was the peak of the Jim Crow era in the US, where Black people basically were classified as 3/5 of a human being. Google it, that's an actual thing. So Black people weren't really classified as full humans yet in the US. They were classified as 3/5 of a human. And then obviously Black people on the continent, we didn't really have any countries of our own. We're being ruled, not even ruled as vassal countries, we're being ruled as personal possessions of monarchs. So like Nigeria, for example, was ruled by the what's it called? British, what's it called again? A Royal Niger Trading Company. So Nigeria wasn't even classified as a country under occupation. So it's classified as a corporate asset of the Queen of England. Like that's how
Still it is.
yeah, that's how non-existent our status was there. So the idea was that if Black people are facing these things and somehow they decide that they want something better, then that's not possible. It must be the Russians who are inciting them to do it. That was 1930. In the 1960s, the same thing was done during the civil rights and African independence era, because those two things were also intertwined. They said it's not possible that Black people in the US and Black people in Africa could be, working on civil rights and independence movements and stuff. It's not possible. This thing is not their idea. It's the Russians. They're communists. The same thing was done in 1985 when this was at the peak of apartheid in South Africa. The then South African Prime Minister, P.W. Botha, gave a speech where he said, there's no problem with apartheid. Most Black people are happy under apartheid, except the ones who have had ideas pushed into their ears by the Russians. That's what South Africa's apartheid Prime Minister P.W. Botha said. You can Google it. He said most Blacks are happy, except those who the Russians have pushed other ideas into their heads. So in other words, a Black South African living under apartheid, as far as they're concerned, that person should have absolutely nothing to complain about in life, because that's your natural position. You're a black monkey. That's what you're supposed to be. What do you mean you want more? You want to be equal to us? No. The only reason you are asking for this is because a white person in Moscow told you to ask for this, because they're fighting against us. That idea couldn't possibly have come out of your head, right? There's a very, very long precedent of the US having this disgustingly racist picture of Black people who are simply trying to do stuff for themselves. So seeing this thing now being reprised, and then with a project that I myself am now personally involved in, you don't imagine, had it been Blinken was in front of me when he was saying it. So I don't know if you remember that episode, I think in 2005 or when George Bush went to Iraq and an Iraqi journalist took off his shoe and stoned him.
And threw it at him, yes.
Yeah, if I was in that press briefing, I feel like I'm gonna do this stuff like that. Because what the fuck do you mean by Africa should be secretly run by RT? Are you mad? Anyway, so yeah, that's a sort of very boiled down version. There's so much I could say, but
Yeah. So what do you think that this would be the impact of this ban on African content creators, especially those who are trying to push African narratives globally? And I also like the part where you said, African Stream really put their backs into making sure that the content was also very good quality and it was very engaging. Honestly, that was one of the many things that actually made me follow African Streams and continue to engage in their content, and also how the content was always presented. Because I like the fact that there were transcriptions on the video. Apart from the transcriptions on the video, I like the part that the most important part of any text or graphic that was being shared was always given a different color. It always stood out. So even if you were reading a very long text, mentally, your eyes would always catch those texts that were given a different color. Like if the base color was white, then the most important parts of the text would be yellow. That was very great, and I really enjoyed always reading long form text from African Streams, especially when it was posted in the graphics. So what do you think the effect of this ban would have on African content creators trying to push African narratives globally?
To be honest, I actually think that it's a signal boost. So I think this is another example of of the US shooting itself in the foot because it knows that it's doing things that it shouldn't be doing. I'll give you an example of what I'm talking about. So um, when during the so-called Russian invasion of Ukraine in February 2002, shortly afterwards, the US announced this huge raft of sanctions, which wasn't targeted at Putin or the Kremlin, but was targeted at Russian civilians, right? The idea being that if we crush the Russian economy, then the Russian people will rise up against Putin, right? And instead of crushing the Russian economy, what simply happened was that they ended up basically sanctioning themselves because they ended up locking Western suppliers out of Russia's market, and Russia simply pivoted east. So now, if you check the numbers, Russia is actually doing better now economically than before the war. And in terms of like consumer choice and all those things, Russian civilians, Russian consumers are not worse off at all than prior to the invasion. And Putin is still in power. So effectively, what that US policy ended up doing was they ended up basically strengthening the opposition. I think they're doing something similar here. And this is the mistake that every dying empire makes. Um, when an empire is at its peak, that empire understands that to be powerful, you have to have a mixture of both carrot and stick. But when an empire is like on its way down, it's like an exploding supernova, which is also when it's at its most dangerous. Um, it starts seeing everything as a threat, and it starts seeing a stick as a solution to everything. So, like in the case of the Russian sanctions, they ended up doing that. In the case of the more recent, like the stunts that was pulled yesterday by a US ally, where a bunch of civilian gadgets were basically rigged and turned into like bombs, essentially. And so far, more than 3,000 civilian casualties have been recorded. That's like a very short-term win, right? And they get a few high fives out of that, yes. But what has been the effect? The effect has been that already, within 24 hours, pretty much the entire Middle Eastern world has started pivoting toward China for every kind of telecommunications or electronic equipment, with the condition being that they will buy from China as long as the entire supply chain involved in production is located in China, so that there's no opportunity for Western infiltration of the supply chain. So effectively, you've won this battle, but you've ended up losing a wider strategic war, and you've made the world a little bit smaller for yourself. You've basically sanctioned your own companies and locked them out of a very important global market. So I think they're doing the same thing here, where in an attempt to stifle information or censor information that they don't like, they've only ended up promoting it. Because frankly speaking, I think there are more people over the past 3 or 4 days, more people have heard of African Stream than the number of people who even used to follow African Stream to begin with, right? And African Stream still continues to exist on other platforms. So yeah, it's been taken off Meta platforms. By the way, there's a backup page on Instagram which is active. I don't know for how long it's going to be active, but there is a backup page on Instagram. It's called African Stream Backup. It's still on TikTok. For now, it's still on Twitter. We know obviously Twitter is American owned, so it's probably just a matter of time before it gets taken off here too. But it's still on TikTok, which is Chinese owned, as you know. And TikTok happens to be the biggest social media platform in the world. So there's that. It's on Rumble. And I think eventually what will happen is when not just Africans, but when the world eventually figures out that these platforms like Meta, YouTube, what's the other one? Sorry, Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Threads. When the world figures out that the American entities behind these platforms are no longer interested in even pretending to be sort of like impartial data bearers, and they're now actively using their platforms as tools for content suppression for the purpose of advancing US political goals, people will start to migrate to other platforms. So already we're seeing this massive migration away from YouTube to platforms like Rumble. I think that's going to accelerate because bear in mind that these platforms, which you think of as like the default platforms now, if you go back maybe 20, 25 years, there was nothing called YouTube. Right? YouTube came from somewhere, started from somewhere. So the same way it went up, it can also go down. Because what keeps those platforms where they are is simply the fact that most people use them. The day most people stop using them is the day they stop being relevant. Once upon a time, as I recall, MySpace was once by far the biggest social media platform in the world. There are people on this space who have never had a MySpace account. Now, if you had told me in 2007, there'll come a time where people won't even know what is MySpace.com. It would have sounded incredible to me, but here we are. So for everything that has a beginning, there's always an end as well. So I think they're going to end up sort of turning this into a sort of Streisand effect, where in trying to restrict certain information, you only end up signal boosting it. I think they're already doing that, actually.
Yes, yeah, they're definitely doing that, and I could also see African streams posting their other platforms that they're on, Patreon. I see people who are very much interested in African geopolitics asking where they could download certain items, and I think I also wanted to suggest that just to prevent probably, and anyways, people will still ask, but to make it easier for people to find these things, it was possible to just share the direct links to other platforms where we can find African stream and also engage their content. It would make it easier for more people to join on those platforms in the event that Elon Musk decides to follow others from the US government. So thank you for that. I wanted to simultaneously kind of like bring up what's happening with the rise of the Alliance of the Sahel States, that's the AES, that comprises Mali, Niger, and Burkina Faso. Recently, I believe on Tuesday, there were attacks in Bamako, where there were gunfire, where there was kind of like gunfire from around 9 a.m. their time. And, it was said that terrorists were actually burning down humanitarian planes. And I believe today I saw news that they were going after the president's plane. And I believe African Stream is going to put out content regarding what's going on within that region, and especially with Mali. I also noticed that when you put out like a message today, like in response to Senator Blinken's accusation, there was talk about the destabilization campaign going on in Mali. And I think it would be very interesting to kind of like highlight on that issue and see how that could generally also impact Nigeria as what I still call Nigeria a geopolitical force. Not sure how to reference Nigeria in this case in terms of geopolitics, because we don't see Nigeria doing a lot, carrying a lot of the responsibilities correctly, especially in West Africa and also in Africa. So how would you kind of like, draw that correlation between what's going on in Mali, what's about to happen in Nigeria, or Nigeria being seen as a failed state, and the clampdown of African Stream, which always highlights some of these issues that are going on in Africa?
Okay, so there's actually a video that I'm looking for, which I'm going to pin to the nest as soon as I find it. It's a video. It's actually an African Stream video, funny enough. It's a clipping from a 24-hour news channel in France. I think this was sometime last year, where a French DGSE official. So for those who don't know what the DGSE is basically the French equivalent of the CIA in America or the NIA in Nigeria. So that's the DGSE. It's like their apex foreign intelligence agency. So a DGSE official appeared on live TV in France and said that, well, the French withdrawal from Niger, that was shortly after the French military had been forced to withdraw completely from Niger after holding itself up there for months. And the TV presenter was basically asking the guy that, okay, so now what next? That has, is this a failure of the French strategy in Niger? And the guy said no, that now that we have successfully pulled out all of our men from that country, that now we have an opportunity to carry out destabilization actions against Nigeria. He said this in the open. I'm going to find that video and post it on the Nest now. So this is actually why platforms like African Stream need to exist. Yes, I found it. Just gonna post it up now.
Awesome. Was it speaking in French, or it was in French and transcribed?
It was in French but transcribed.
Okay.
So it's up on the Jumbotron now. If you can see it. So basically, that's the background for the events you are seeing in the Sahel. So, for those who don't understand how war works in the 21st century, in 21st century, no country can just invade another country unilaterally, just like that, right? Not even the US. There has to be some sort of narrative premise for it. There has to be a justification for it. In the case of Iraq, the justification was that supposedly Saddam Hussein had weapons of mass destruction, which was not true, but it was a lie that was very, very successfully and aggressively sold. And then in addition to supposedly having weapons of mass destruction, then we had all that pepper and fish that was thrown into the storyline that, Saddam's sons were actually animals. So yeah, they used to rape people and stuff, but there was a lot of other stuff which was categorically not true. They say Saddam, when there was an ethnic genocide where he and his sons were personally tossing babies into a furnace and all those kind of stories. And then later on, it turned out that the so-called 14-year-old girl, the witness, who supposedly, she did a whole appearance where she was crying. Oh, they were burning, they were roasting the babies. It turned out that she was the son of an ambassador. That she was the daughter of an ambassador, and she was basically coached. They basically made up that thing and they coached her. And then she went to US Congress and she basically delivered an Oscar performance. So that's how the premise, by the way, this was reported, but again, it falls into that memory hole. Because once you've gone to war, it doesn't matter anymore. You've already gone to war, right? And then people will now say, oh, it won't happen next time, but of course it will happen next time. So when you are going to war, you have to construct a narrative justification for it. In the case of Afghanistan, they said harboring Osama bin Laden, which may or may not have been true. In the case of Niger and the rest of the Sahel, currently, you can't just say that you want to invade, because people will say, why? What did they do to you? You can't say that they are threatening your security, because what the hell did Niger or Mali or Burkina Faso do to the US or France? So then you then have to create another type of justification, which will be similar to the one that was done in 2011 in Libya. Now, what was the justification in Libya in 2011? The justification wasn't that Gaddafi was bad. That wasn't actually why officially they invaded Libya. They invaded Libya under the premise of this thing called R2P. R2P means responsibility to protect. So it's basically a doctrine that states in international, it's not written anywhere, but it's like an unspoken international principle that where civilians are being attacked in large numbers, where civilians are being killed in large numbers, then foreign entities have a moral obligation to intervene. They have a responsibility to protect civilians. So when, if you recall, the Libyan city, I believe it was Benghazi that was having its issue then, and supposedly civilians were being killed in their hundreds by Gaddafi's forces and whatnot. This R2P doctrine was activated by NATO. And NATO said, okay, we're not invading Libya. All we are doing is that we are intervening to protect civilians. We have a responsibility to protect. So instead of calling it an invasion, they called it they said they were imposing a no-fly zone. Supposedly so that Gaddafi's air force wouldn't be able to fly and bomb civilian targets. In actual fact, what a no-fly zone actually means is that the people who are declaring the no-fly zone then have the authority to make sure that all military or air force assets within the range of this so-called no-fly zone are deactivated. And you know what I mean by deactivated? That means they're going to bomb the shit out of them. And that's exactly what they did.
Yeah.
And they bombed the shit out of Libya. They sent that country back to the Stone Age. That country has not known peace since then, and they called it no-fly zone under the pretext of responsibility to protect. That's how people go to war nowadays. Something similar is being cooked up for the Sahel. Now, I don't know if you guys have been noticing, there has been this over the past few months, now that it has become clear that these Sahelians are tough people. We can't just sort of, the way France tried to do strong head, we're not leaving, we're not recognizing, blah, blah, blah.
Mm-hmm.
Now that hasn't worked, the tactic has changed. The tactic is now that, oh my God, those poor Sahelians, the people are suffering, and these stupid military governments cannot help them. Look at how the terrorists are just killing them in their numbers. It's so terrible what is happening to them. I'm sure you've been seeing this campaign. You've been seeing it everywhere from VOA to DW to Premium Times in Nigeria. I don't know if you saw a story that was published on Premium Times yesterday.
And I think Premium Times, now that you mentioned Premium Times, because I've been noticing that Premium Times has been mostly pushing out certain agendas. And I fear that
exactly, because who funds them? Who funds them? Premium Times is funded by the Omedia Network. The Omedia Network is the CIA front, right? Premium Times is funded by American government intelligence. So let's just get that out of the way. So what they are going to publish is NATO propaganda. That's exactly what they're doing. So if you saw that story they published yesterday, the headline was something like Sahel on the brink. And it was this story talking at your heartstrings about how things are so terrible in the Sahel. And the story completely failed to mention that this terrible Sahel, Nigeria, for example, is doing 11% annual economic growth, which is like 4 times that of Nigeria. But oh my God, they are so terrible. But it's us that are not suffering in Nigeria. But them, oh my God, they have a humanitarian disaster crisis. The narrative that is being constructed is that the world needs to intervene in the Sahel to save these poor Black people from these terrible military dictators. Like, as you may or may not be aware, France actually has a battle cruiser stationed off the coast of Abidjan already, right now as we speak. Right? They are preparing for war. So this whole thing about, oh, the Sahelians are suffering, that's what it's about. And that's why voices like African Stream, that's why they're going after those voices, to silence them. And people like myself. Because that's actually the bigger picture of what is going on. Somebody wants to go to war. So I hope I answered the question. I'm going to have to take a break for the next 20 minutes because I actually have to go on TV till about 8:40 Nigerian time. But I'm still going to stay on the space. And then I'll come back.
Awesome. Thank you very much, David, for actually gracing us with your presence and, the amount of information you shared, the opinion, facts, and all. I'd like to also thank everyone who has joined us in the speaker section and those who are listening. Thank you for joining. Ewuma, thanks for joining. Oganika, thanks for joining. The Africa Diary, thank you for joining on stage. And Peter Smith, thank you for joining. Ewuma, do you have any contribution to the topic of the discussion and what David Hundeyin has shared? That's with respect to the sense of digital media, African digital media.
Okay, thanks. I think my position is a little bit very, very middle ground for people that know the way I lean, because I am stubbornly very, very on the stance of agency. Now, I can understand the subterfuge that people talk about when it comes to external actors, but the agency of us Africans, as a people, crafting our own stories, our own infrastructure, our own rails, on which we dissipate information, is something that, I tend to focus a whole lot more. I think, like someone says, like the things within my locus of control, that, like, I'm very, very stubborn with it. Like, there's nothing, people you're free to have their opinions and all that, but like, that's the hill that I will always want to die on. And this is because of my experience and relating with my average countrymen, and like the social culture, the social situation, the politics, and all that. So now, like this situation that has happened with the removal of, like, this good platform, I don't know, like, it depends, like, perspective. I don't know. There's some people that I've heard from people that are saying that, like, maybe it's because of it has a very assertive anti-Western stance. That is why it is leaning that way, or that is why, it's coming under such flack. Because I mean, RT is sponsored by it's sponsored by the Russian government and all that. So, like, making people trying to make all these connections and all that. So I just maybe would try to see, because okay, if you want to have like a platform on which you're gonna put like them African streams, like, we don't really have any platform, unless maybe Iroko TV is gonna come up with like a streaming. I mean, sorry, I'm not putting ad for anybody out there. Apologies to the Aproko house, but like, maybe if we can, you know, have platforms like that are African owned down to the infrastructure. We now have to start talking about even data centers within our own client, such that, like, the infrastructure from the bottom up down to what is being delivered to people is entirely African. So you're not subject to the whims and the ebbs and flows of geopolitics and all these other, what do you call it, nuances that exist within, the world as we know it right now. You understand? So that's just my submission for that. Maybe when David comes back, I think, yeah, I just have like just a question to ask, and it's around RT. But like that's all I have to say for now. Thank you very much.
Awesome. Thank you very much, Ewoma. And then we'll move over to Peter Smith. He's had his hand up for a while. Thank you for joining us. And for those who are just joining, welcome to Apoko TV on X. We have with here David Hundain, who has taken a break. He has a television engagement. But we were actually speaking about African narratives in a censored digital world. And the basis for the topic was because of the recent ban across social media platforms of African Stream, which is a Pan-Africa media outlet majorly based on social media. They try to push African interests to the global audience, from an African perspective. They try to inform Africans about, ongoing geopolitical events, how it connects to Africa, its impact on Africa, and how some of these topics should be seen, especially from a factual perspective. And just recently, Senator Blinken accused African Stream of being an outlet for Kremlin propaganda. The African Stream's team, they've put out a message, rejecting that claim, and also stating that they are not being funded by RT or by the Kremlin, and they are self-funded, and they are majorly based in Kenya, and David is part of that team. So that's why we're speaking. We're trying to assess the impact of that ban on African voices in the digital world, and why some of these platforms are very important, because we have realized that we've seen that most Africans generally do not pay critical attention to geopolitics, and also geopolitics within Africa and also out of Africa. And sometimes they do not seem to also draw that correlation, see how it connects and how it impacts our lives, our various lives across various African countries. So let's have Peter Smith speak on the topic, and then we'll move to the African Diary to speak on the topic, and then Eyewitness. So thank you. Peter Smith, please go ahead.
Thank you very much, Aproko TV, for having me. And also, I know David is not here, but I would also want to thank him. He has been doing a really good job, for most of us, keeping us informed in one way or the other. So why I raised my hand was to ask few questions, but I think to David actually, but I think I would like to, opine on the issue of, like, the last speaker said something about infrastructures, and I think this aspect is really what we are suffering in Africa. because we really do not own anything of our own. And I know it's due to the lack of FDIs, and we know the reason why the FDIs, when they come in, they go to the wrong hands, and and things get messed up. So these FDIs that we are lacking has been most of the struggles we have in Africa at large. We don't have any infrastructures of our own. Look at the continent as a whole, up to 1 billion or plus, we don't even have a social media that we like solely, kind of is coming off our shores, something like this. So we leaning on what is coming from the Western part of the world. Well, this is what we should expect, they can easily, this is what they have done to, like David highlighted earlier, on how when the war started here in Europe, they immediately had to start being strict on Russia, both the supply chain, everything, finance wise, everything got shut down. Russia had to improvise in one way or the other, and they had their economy back in order, even though some European nations still supply things to Russia indirectly. So these are the things that we need. I don't know, social media, like me being leaning on the VC side of like venture capital side of thinking. I think my hands focus. I've been noticing this as an issue that we do not have. I actually do not live in Nigeria, but I'm Nigerian. But how I've been observing things where I'm at, people really do not know what is going on, in Africa. And it's really like touching me. I don't know how I can help in one way or the other. So this is why particularly I'm a big fan of David, like for what he stands for. And I think what he stands for is for the betterment of the whole Africa. This is not a Nigerian thing, like Africa at large.
Thank
So
you. Yeah. So thank you very much, Peter, for your submission. Thank you very much. That was a good one. So we'll move over to the next speaker, the African Diary. Thank you for joining us, and would love to hear your thoughts on the ongoing events concerning the digital ban, or would I say the ban on African streams, media outlets on Meta and YouTube, its impact on African voices, and its correlation with the geopolitical events currently happening in Africa and around the world.
Yes. First of all, thank you for having me, I'll just start by clarifying, not clarifying, but to bring a bit of clarity to something. Because I remember when I watched that press release, I was stunned to even hear the name being mentioned. However, most people might not know. Uh, well, to begin with, I forgot to say I was one of the first, among the first members of African Stream staff, but I'm no longer a member. Right? Initially, how it started, the CEO was recruiting to start RT Africa. That is something everyone can go on Google and check, right? So when I saw the US, the US made that connection, that's the first thing that came to my mind. Because initially, the CEO was recruiting to start RT Africa. And then it's later, after the ban on Russian stuff and all that, it's only later that the name changed. Not the name changed, but I was told that he decided to go with a different project. Right now, I'm not saying the two are related. However, the name of the founder is the same for RT Africa and African Stream, right? And obviously, in my year there as a staff, I often I used to wonder, right? Because sorry, I used to wonder like who was funding this, to understand, because it wasn't a small operation. And there was there were staff who were there. So who was paying for all this? But at the time, I was told it was, African celebrities and other donors. Even though the African celebrity part, I didn't really believe it, based on, obviously, I'm choosing my words, because in the contract that I signed is that once you leave the company, you can't say anything bad about it. So that's why, I'm kind of choosing my words. But still, those were the question. Who was funding? At the end of the day, I even think what has happened here is a blessing in disguise, right? Because it gives African Stream the opportunity to actually come out and be clear about it, because the thing has been very, very shaky. Because at the end of the day, we need to remember, especially, me at the time, I'm someone who often travels, right? I need to know what I needed to know what I was getting myself into. If two elephants are fighting, mice do not get involved. To understand, so you need to know. I needed to know what I was getting involved into. You see, and the other thing. So it's just because when I heard that press release, I would say I wasn't really shocked per se, because I already had my doubts, but I was shocked at the same time as well, because I'll give you an example. Um, yes, the staff, 100% of the staff, Africans, right? However, at least when I was still a staff member, our videos and scripts were edited beyond Africa, right? And those were the kind of things that used to make me question and wonder what's really going on in terms of quality. Quality of people, the staff working there, excellent. Everyone, as you can see from the videos, everyone really puts in 100%. Sorry. Now, in terms of the future for African content creator, I think this, because even though I'm no longer part of African Stream, but I'm still a content creator who focuses on African matters, because that's why I was even recruited in the first place. I think it really goes to show how us as Africans, we really need to step up and take this thing serious. And the reason why the funding was always a concern to me, because I know for a fact, I worked for a few organizations. You know that the people who foot the bills are oftentimes the people who set the agenda. Now, nobody can convince me that us as Africans who claim to love the African continent, we cannot, for instance, like the African Stream, they want to set up, was it a fundraiser or something like that? You cannot convince me that we cannot reach out to our pocket and fund such company and make sure people like African Stream and other media channel can continue to produce excellent piece of work, rather than always waiting for fundings from left, right, and center. Because as we all know now, with all those bands, I don't know if they had monetized their channel, because at the time, anyway, I wasn't privy to all those informations. But if staff were being paid due to the monetization, and now that is gone, what are they going to do now? You see. Anyway, that's me.
Yeah, thank you very much, the African Diary, for your contribution to the topic. And I also wanted to ask, do we have or have you noticed other platforms that put out kind of like not necessarily similar content, but platforms that make sure they try to push that, what I say, African interest, African agenda, and Africa's lived experience with respect to interventions from, what I say, both Eastern and Western entities in Africa and the impact on Africans? Do we have similar platforms that do the same thing that the African Stream does?
Was that a question
Yes,
to me?
yes.
Well, platforms like that, I wouldn't know. However, what you have is a lot of individual people doing what African Stream does, but without that organization,
Mhm.
you see.
Yeah.
Because, like I said, and that's the reason why I was even recruited, because basically it's like, I'm sorry if people don't follow football, but it's like football, it's like a football team. You get what you consider the players who are fit to play into your team, and then you bring them together. However, what we have now, it's the same thing we have across the African continent, is that everyone is trying to do their own thing on their own side, when we all know that one finger cannot wash the face the way 10 fingers can, you see. And yeah, that's the problem we
Oh,
have.
awesome. Thank you very much. And I think this, what you just mentioned now, actually, it just clears some doubts about some of your previous statements, because I think from what I've seen, because we know several other journalists, they do their thing, they have certain interests. Some people like to connect dots, especially with geopolitics. And then when you see different African journalists who are always trying to highlight some of these issues affecting African countries, why they're affecting them, and why people need to pay attention to them, it's easy to say, hey, you, let's come together and have like an organized, what I say, entity or structure to be able to gain critical mass and ensure that people are paying attention to such context. And I think we need more of platforms like African Stream, so that more people are paying attention. So thank you for that submission. So we'll go over to Chimeze. I think, oh, I had someone who wanted to speak, and I was also looking forward to hearing his thoughts on the issue. But let's move over to Chimeze. And Chimeze, welcome. Thanks for joining. So, what are your thoughts and what's your contribution to the topic of the discussion?
Thank you very much. Thank you for having me. Thank you for creating this space. I've been I've been listening to the various opinions and what everybody has had to say so far. And one thing I would like to quickly chip in is this. As an African, when you start to have that consciousness that come with being African and have that realization of where Africa and Africans stand in the global food chain, you have to pick your friends and you have to know who your enemies are. Every person, every region, you need friends, you need allies. And if we can really look at Africa today and tell ourselves the truth, who is responsible for where we find ourselves today as Africans? Why is it that we have the largest number of young people migrating out of the continent, literally abandoning everything that they have to just travel outside the shores of Africa and take up whatever life that they get out there, so long as it's not in Africa? Who put us where we are today? If you're scared to say that, I will tell you it's the West, it's the US, and it stems back hundreds of years, and it's still happening today. The previous person made a comment about African streams, how it started, how it was regionally supposed to be Russian, RT Africa or whatever. And I would say, even if that's the case, we still have to pick our friends. We have to understand that we are at war. We might not have guns pointing at our heads, but we are at war. We are at war with people that have decided what positions we as Africans would have for eternity, I'll tell you. We are at war with people that have decided to tell us how to think, to tell us what to believe. And for us to get out of that war, we really need proper friends. We need friends in high places because we are dealing with people in high places. We're dealing with the most powerful empire that the world has probably ever seen. And to take down that monster, you need a fellow monster. That's my opinion. There's nothing wrong with Africans aligning themselves with China. If you think, I'm not saying China is perfect, I'm not saying China is flawless, but if it will take an African Chinese alliance to liberate Africa from the Western imperialist prison and the US prison that we found ourselves in, then so be it. People form friends and alliances to achieve whatever purpose that they want to achieve. We have media organizations that are also funded by the West in Africa. We have media organizations that are funded by the US in Africa, and they are doing the bidding of the US and the West in Africa. So there's nothing wrong with us waking up and say, we are not happy with the relationship that we are having with the West. If we can find a partner that will form a relationship that is mutually beneficial, then we have every right to take it up. If it's Russia, then so be it. The US is not perfect. The West is not perfect. Russia is not perfect. Africa is not perfect. But if it would take an African-Russian alliance, who died and gave these people the authority to decide who you have to be friends with and who you shouldn't be friends with? Most of our politicians in Africa are puppets to the West, and they are agents to the West. And they do whatever they want, and they are part of the reason why Africa is also where it is. So if we have a platform that will educate young Africans to start to grow that consciousness, to really realize who our enemies are, I don't care who is funding it. It can be Russia, it can be China, I don't care. That's just my opinion. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your contribution, Chimize. Yeah, I think there were points to pick from your submission. If we also look at countries like India, because also I believe the US asked India to block RT in India. And actually, just to go back before this announcement by Secretary Blinken, Anthony Blinken, I'm not sure that a lot of Africans, maybe in West Africa, I'm not sure a lot of West Africans, a lot of Africans really, really watch RT on cable. I'm not sure RT is like a first choice cable TV network or cable station that anyone would watch. And I don't know about social media, because on social media, RT is present on social media. I'm not sure how many Africans religiously go to RT to get the news. It's either between CNN, Fox. That's for those who are very Western aligned. CNN
And
and
BBC.
I believe NBC, ABC, depending on where you're watching your cable. So, from that perspective, do you think, especially looking at what India is doing, do you think that they have done the right thing in saying, you know what, we will determine what information we should consume, and we will not be told to listen to one particular voice. We will listen to various options, make our deductions, and and just move on. So what's your perspective on that
Yeah.
direct?
When I it's very interesting you made that point. When I heard the response from India, I mean, we this is coming from an empire that has sold itself to the world as being the what would I call them, like they are the pace setters when it comes to freedom, free will. But then here they are trying to then dictate to other people what they should and shouldn't believe, what they should and shouldn't consume, who they should be friends with, and who they shouldn't be friends with. And I just think it's I'm happy this whole thing is happening. And the reason why I'm happy is because I think this is a clear sign that the US, I think they are finally realizing that, wow, people are seeing us for what we truly are. There are multiple voices speaking to a lot of people about what the US is really all about. And all when they had the monopoly on information, it was fine. But now we have alternative voices. And for anything, I think it's actually a good development, because people that didn't know this now are actually standing up and like, okay, what's happening here? And people who are aware of it are also saying, oh, wow, okay, there we go. So either ways, I think it's a win-win, in my opinion. But what we then need to do now as Africans is to have a lot of voices, loud and sound voices, who will really start this whole process of educating Africans, especially the young up and coming Africans, to let us know who our enemies really are. That is very important. And few years from now, like David said, we would have a new generation of Africans that really know themselves. And I think that's what these guys are scared of the most, because they are realizing that there is a generation of Africans that are actually waking up, and they are not like their parents, they're not like their grandparents. They are really realizing that, okay, there is something wrong here. These guys are really our enemies and not our friends. And now they want to shut down every voice that is speaking contrary to what they've made everybody believe. So yeah, I think we should have our stance, and it starts with re-educating ourselves and really understanding what's at play.
All right. Thank you very much, Mise, for that contribution. Jamila, thank you. I see you've had your hands up for a while.
Yeah, good evening, everyone.
Good evening. Thank you for joining us. So, what are your thoughts and your contribution to the topic of the discussion?
Well, my contribution, being the daughter of a Pan-Africanist, a veteran journalist, my late father, it took me back to the story of the World Allied Nations Conference in Cuba, sorry. And he was there, and where underdeveloped nations united, and one of the main agenda, it was like these satellites, and they believe those world powers are trying to indoctrinate the mindset of the underdeveloped nations through the media, through internet, through videos, through movies, through a lot of things. All of us, as we were growing up, we knew about Captain America and all this. It was a way of indoctrinating our mindset, forgetting our cultures, our customs. And then what he used to argue on is, if we don't censor what that generation at that point is going to be absorbing through the media, TV, and a lot of things. Later on, if you are alive today, he would have told the government, we will have told Africa, I told you so. Because this is exactly where we are. Because you merge capitalism, you merge in the censorship of digital media. We all know the pen is mightier than the sword. And what is the pen now lately? It is social media. It is all this digital world we have. We've come so far, but who is to blame for that? Back in the day, the voices like the powers that censored before the media was sold up, NUJ was there to checkmate the Nigerian, especially when it came to Nigeria, checkmate bodies, but now they privatized everything. So you can't even checkmate or censor a lot of things. Now politics, you see capitalism, politics, and then you merge it with what we're talking about now, this censorship. So who will have the power to stand up and say, but with the united front and our voices, if we do understand the logic of this, and because we need to go back to the past, we need to educate ourselves. Where did it begin? Where is the narrative? Why aren't our stories being told well through the media by ourselves? Wow, when people, those that are in charge of censoring us, why are they trying to do it for their own selfish interest? And then how many media houses are being owned? And look, the profession journalism itself. When we come back to Africa, how many investigative journalists do we have? They cannot afford it. That's the truth. Some of them have died. Their families are there. A lot of things goes on with this profession. But then it has, with the advent of digitalized media, there is a lot that we can accomplish, because even in Africa, we are not united. What is dividing us? Somebody has instilled something to indoctrinate our mindset that our differences, it is what is dividing us. No, we have a beautiful story. Our lands are blessed. They need us, whether they like it or not. But we have forgotten to love ourselves, to value what we have. And if we don't begin to sell this through the social media, through the media, we are continue going to be complaining and talking about what we're talking about today. That is all I have to say. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Jamila, for that contribution. David, are you back? Are you done with your engagement?
Yes, I'm back.
Thank you. I hope you went well, actually. Anyways, you should share the link here so that those of us who missed it because we're here can go and see it. But a woman had a question for you with regards to African Stream, how it was set up, and if you can actually take the question. Woman, are you there? So you can speak to David. He's actually back.
Yeah.
Okay, go ahead.
Okay. Yeah. Yes, I'm here. Yeah, David. Thanks for honoring us with this your presence on Apoko TV. Yeah. Two questions because it's someone was here earlier, and I think he pointed that he linked the founding or a team or whatever of behind African Streams that had, there was something about an RT Africa that was supposed to be, but I don't know what happened. Now, David, from whatever is on the internet, because someone before you came here, someone talked about how, narratives and all that. RT, like DW News, is sponsored by the government of these countries. The Western media that we are talking about is not sponsored by the government. We can say regulated, we can say they have their own agendas, but there are differences between all them and all that. So if we're having someone is talking about how RT Africa was supposed to birth, and this RT Africa is going to be, when you trace it down, it falls down back to that, RT as a whole. Wouldn't you say that, some people have concerns with that? And this is keeping in mind that, David, that there's almost like you have like a blockade of Western channels in Russia and all that. But in this other side part of the world, if you can have your internet or this, like it has been streaming for a while. It's in recent times that you have this. So is it not just like people talk about how, in China, what do you call it? There's a wall against some certain, what do you call it? Tech companies. But, like when you're talking about TikTok, but you see TikTok that is Chinese is like the biggest social platform in the US. Still, even if they have data centers in the US or whatever, wouldn't you say that it's like sort of like double speak from, or is hypocritical from people that are accusing the West of censorship and all that? Thanks.
What I'll say to that is that a lot of our people in Nigeria have a psychological problem. And that problem is that they always feel the need to insert themselves into other people's narratives, other people's problems, other people's quarrels. As a Nigerian, waiting concern you with whether US and Russia have a problem, whether US media is blockaded in Russia or Russian media is blockaded in waiting concern you. Nigeria is a non-aligned nation, as most of Africa is. Our only civilizational priority is to escape from poverty. That's literally the only thing we are here to do as a people. Escape from poverty. And then our children and maybe their children can start having some other conversations. But we need the maximum possible amount of trade, the maximum possible amount of information. We need everything from everyone. So you cannot, as a Nigerian or as an African, start to ask yourself, start to say, well, DW is banned in Russia, so that means that there's press freedom in this place and there's no press freedom here, so I'll take this one, I won't take that one. That's a very stupid mindset to have, because frankly, it's not your problem. It's that same kind of mindset that is the reason why currently I'm made to understand that Russian flagged ships are not allowed to berth in Nigeria. Nigeria, where the thing no concern. We are not the ones who impose sanctions on Russia. We are not part of NATO. But if the ship is Russian flagged, apparently it's not allowed into Nigerian waters. How stupid is that? How is that our business? And so it's that same kind of mindset that somehow people see themselves almost as like American vassals by default. You're not an American vassal. You're a Nigerian. You're an African. The official position of most African states is that we are non-aligned. So, whatever is happening, whatever quarrel is happening between individual countries in the West or in the East, those are not really our problems. My position, as I've always said, is as an African, sorry, let me come back in like 10 seconds. I need to do something.
Okay, awesome. Thank you very much. That was a great question, Awoma, and David had to be interrupted while he was giving his response to that question. And I think some of the points that David have highlighted with respect to how we view some of these geopolitical tensions, especially with respect to Nigeria, is actually very important, because actually this is actually news to me that Russian vessels are not allowed to berth, or whatever he called it, or maybe dock in Nigeria. And this is a country that is looking for FX. And I think it's actually very interesting to see how India is managing this type of situation and how Nigeria is handling it. Because what India has been able to do, especially from the COVID era, I believe it was also from the COVID era, is how they've been responding to geopolitical issues, always trying to make sure that they stay in the middle and they're not necessarily making not necessarily making a lot of enemies. India is always positioning itself and trying to put Indians first. I believe when the Russia-Ukraine war started, America was reaching out to its allies and trying to tell them to circumvent or not to purchase Russian oil. But India's position was, we're a sovereign country. You will not tell us who to be your enemies are not our enemies. Your friends are not necessarily our friends. We will treat everyone based on our relationship with them, and we'll put Indians first. So the US told India not to purchase Russian oil. And that meant that India would have to purchase crude oil at a more expensive rate than they would have if they had purchased from Russia. And that meant that a lot of their a lot of their FX would be going towards the oil of the purchase of crude oil if they had told they honored the request of the US. So I believe this is what also David has just alluded to, what he just referred to, with respect of Nigeria not allowing Russian vessels to dock. And we're a country that's looking for foreign exchange. So this also relates to the fact that India also refused the US's request for RT to be blocked in their country. So I think when we see these issues happening all over the world, we always have to put ourselves as Africans or Nigerians first, or whatever country that you're representing on this platform. You have to look out for your own interest first, see how this would impact you, and put the interest of your citizens first. I think that's the direction we should always come from. So while we wait for David to come back, let's accept new speakers. I can see Darren is trying to speak. So Darren, thank you for joining us on this space. And for those who are just joining, we're speaking about African narratives in the censored digital world. And this is off the back of the recent censorship of African streams across various social media platforms. And yeah, please go ahead and contribute to the topic of the discussion there. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. I just wanted to add something. I've never quite understood why it seems that a lot of Nigerians and Africans generally take the position as if we are, emissaries, or we are, sort of Americans on African soil. Like, I've never really understood, that sort of like narrative that seems to pass. Like, we are not obliged to take the side of the US in whatever like um issues that they involve themselves in. They are not naturally always in the right. I do not understand that sort of mindset. Like David said, really, at this particular point in our lives as Africans, we need to, as fast as possible, figure out how to grow. And these other countries are currently like the developing countries of the world. You would think that, I mean, because we are trying to become developing countries, countries like India, countries like China, countries like, these countries are currently like, they're countries that were supposed to be looking, to seeing how like their models of development is and seeking to emulate such, countries that were supposed to be forming alliance with, so that there can be exchange of ideas, exchange of technology. So I do not really understand why like the natural position of quite a number of Nigerians, and it looks like Africans, is that to always take the US's side. That really, for the most part, you know, as often as historically tries as much as possible to limit, the amount of technology that they are willing to share, like with the African continent. Like, why? Why do we want to take their side all the time? And as it is, like you highlighted, it's, when countries refuse, this requests, they take them more seriously. They would take India more seriously because they enforced their sovereignty. But if you have turned yourself to a vassal state and you are trying, even put us on the back foot in when we are trying to do, some sort of diplomatic relations, because when you turn yourself to a pseudo vassal state and yet you want to command power, you want to command respect, how is that supposed to work? How is it supposed to work when they can? You have practically turned yourself into a puppet when they tell you to jump and you ask how far. How exactly are they supposed to take you seriously? And this is not just a problem with just citizens. Apparently, it's a problem with African leaders as well. Like everywhere else, you see that India, like you highlighted, for instance, refused to buy to not buy oil from Russia. There was no consequence to it. So why exactly? I've never really understood that sort of thinking. At this particular point in time, if we, as much as possible, position ourselves, it would make them more willing. It would make them take you seriously. It will make them more willing, because you will become that sort of country, or that sort of continent that, because they want to neutralize for the most part the influence of Russia and China. Perhaps you would even get more than you're currently getting from them. You are better able to bargain for the things that you want. So I really don't understand that position, that it looks like we're by ourselves, shooting ourselves in the foot. And I've never really understood, that sort of thinking.
Thank you, Darren. Thank you very much for your contribution. Ewoma, please go ahead. I see you muted your
Yeah.
mic and you like to.
Yes, I want to comment briefly on that. And Damian, you know my position. I'm very in the middle on this, and I will explain. I will maybe give a semblance of maybe why people lean the certain way they do. First of all, I think it still falls down to economics. Right now, India is buying lots of oil from Russia via Dubai, because you've had lots of countries have taken advantage of the sanctions to line their pockets. So you have countries in Central Asia are raking in lots of cash right now because they are the conduit through which Russia can bring in some things that they can't otherwise bring in. The UAE, Dubai has turned into I think they are doing a lot more oil trades than before because also of their non-alignment. So you need to build capacity as a nation, for you to choose where you are going to lean. Now, India that we're talking about, their firms invested $35 billion in the US economy in 2022. The Infosys, those big IT firms. So you are saying that there's a limit to how much this other country can push. They can appeal, but at the same time, with the decoupling that is going on in the world right now, people are, trying to sort of this globalization, less of China. You are seeing a whole lot of Western investment still entering into India. I mean, look at who
Sorry, is
the
there an echo?
Oh, okay. Okay.
Go ahead.
Okay, sorry. I mean, who are the CEOs of a lot of like these tech companies abroad? Indian Americans. And it comes down to that your question, why are Nigerians? My sister, you have lots of Nigerian Americans. If you look at our source of remittance when it comes to like, the 20 to $25 billion that we do yearly from outside the country, look at the top 3, 4, 5 countries that it's coming from. So naturally, you will have these things will play a role, when it comes to people's mindset and all that. So in summary, going down to it still comes down to economics. What is our position in global supply chains? Are we indispensable? There's someone I support so strongly that his politics was also predicated on that. When he was asked a question like, they make plans for the world, but when they make plans for the world, you are not in those plans. And that was the beginning of his own political journey to do whatever he's doing till date. So I think this is where there is the issue. If we get a lot more assertive with our economics, we can be able to set certain agendas. Because if you go and check our global trade, like our contribution to global trade, so economics is also very, very important when it comes to projecting and posturing. And I sort of like, I get the subterfuge part, because please, let's not make any mistake. In the history of human civilization, these things have happened. Like empires would empire whatever they are doing. You understand? It still falls down to those to solve whatever they can internally and see what they can do. As we are talking right now, there are countries that host bases with this person, they share gas fields with this other person, and they are still there. So why can't Africa do that? Why can't we leverage our own alignment for, what do you call it, economics? So I feel that when we start taking our economics a whole lot more seriously, it will make it a lot, our positions will be a lot more defined, such that it's not something that, you are blowing here, you are blowing here. Because also, lastly, sorry, India also has a historical relationship with Russia, based on the fact that a lot of their military equipment, they source from the Russians. And when you buy this equipment, service agreements, they span over years. So you can't just, because of what this person is saying, I want to just cut off that. I mean, you have billions of dollars of military equipment that are from these people. You have service agreements. Why are you going to get spare parts? All those things and all that. So, I think it's what I mean. I think yes, I admire India, like with respect to how they stand. Their foreign minister right now is like I think he's like one of the best in the world right now. But it's something that yeah, Africa should look forward to emulate. You know, they have pharmacy, they have IT, so we need to build our economics in such a way that we can set our agenda. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I'm not sure if David is back and he
I
will
am.
continue to. Okay, please go ahead. Yeah.
Yeah. So what I was interrupted very rudely.
Yeah, you were trying
Yeah,
to
but
question us.
yeah. So I was pointing out that there seems to be this idea that the Western position somehow is the default position of the world, and it's not true. The only reason we think it's true is that we have grown up inside the informational ambit of the West. That's why. That's the only reason. So the way you think or you've been conditioned to think as an African is completely different to the way someone in Cambodia, which is within China's ambit, has been conditioned to think. So you think of the US and Europe as the center of the world. Someone in East Asia sees it in a completely different way, right? So the reason someone is in East Asia sees Asia as the center of the world, someone in Europe or America sees the global north as the center of the world, and then someone in Africa sees Europe and America as the center of the world. That the person in Africa has been deluged by Western propaganda. And the most effective type of propaganda is the kind that you don't even know exists. Which is why if I tell you that you have been fed a diet of Western propaganda, you say no, I'm an independent thinker. No, you are fucking not. That's the point. There's a popular Russian joke which I'm going to tell to illustrate how this works. So the joke goes that a KGB agent and a CIA agent meet in Moscow. They're both retiring, right? So after years of like facing off against each other, they are finally retiring. So they're having a conversation before they leave. And the CIA agent is talking to the KGB agent, and he's like, you know, I really admire Russia for its incredible propaganda. That Russian propaganda is amazing. You guys put so much effort into it. And then the KGB agent laughs and says, "Yes, oh yeah, we do our best, but you know, we don't hold the candle to you guys. That American propaganda is like next level." And then the CIA officer replies, "What propaganda? America doesn't have propaganda." And like that's the joke. Because like this, even the CIA agent is so brainwashed, like he doesn't realize just how powerful US propaganda is. Think about it. Which country do you know that dedicates so much time and effort and money to controlling the media of other countries that it even boasts in its diplomatic cable, such as the kind you can find on WikiLeaks, it even boasts about which journalists and which media houses it has on payroll in places like Kaduna. I'm not talking about Lagos and Abuja. The US State Department boasts, you can check WikiLeaks for this. In fact, I tweeted it and I'll dig up the tweet and I'll post it on the Jumbotron. They're boasting about having journalists at Radio Nigeria Kaduna on State Department payroll. Imagine the journalists they have on payroll in Lagos and Abuja. Imagine the platforms. Imagine your Punch and Guardian and Vanguard and this day that you grew up reading. Imagine how much of what was inside there was paid for by foreign government. But that's the thing, a lot of Nigerians don't know what they don't know. And because you don't know, you assume that, what you think you know is the default, it's the center of the world. No, it's not. Right? So whether the US appears to be, this patron saint of, freedom and whatnot, it's just a construct. It's a narrative construct. It's not true. It's the same way someone in Russia will also believe that Russia is a bastion of, whatever. Someone in China will believe China is something. And the only people on earth who don't believe that their own civilization is the best thing since sliced bread are Africans. Because they are busy looking at other people's civilizations and trying to insert themselves into other people's conversations, which you will never fit into. Which is why I was very happy that the host mentioned India, because that is the exact model that we should be following. We are non-aligned and we have one job. That job is to grow. India understands this perfectly. So they tell India, oh, NATO is imposing sanctions on Russia, so you shouldn't buy Russian. But India will say, fuck you, I'll buy the Russian one. Because my priority is my own economic growth and the well-being of my own people. And they will do it, and the sky will not fall down, the world will not end. Meanwhile, the same people will come and tell Nigeria that stop trading with Russian vessels. And Nigeria will comply. Because supposedly because Russia invaded Ukraine. So Nigeria cannot trade with Russia. Meanwhile, Nigeria is selling oil to Israel. So meanwhile, so you can just see that the only thing Nigeria is doing is that it's just following like the puppets that it is. It's a lapdog. How does that help any of us? That's a completely useless foreign policy to have. So this idea that, well, going back to the initial question where someone was suggesting that because supposedly some of the founding members of the founder of African Stream used to work with some certain state media, therefore 2 + 2 = to a bar. Well, something you also have to bear in mind is that if you are trying to put across certain types of information, such as the fact of the US being a bully that it is, most news media on the planet will not let you do that because it's simply too risky to do that, because that's the whole point of the US being a bully. It has a lot of power. It can make people's lives difficult. So generally speaking, the only platforms that you have the freedom to do such things on are state-funded platforms in countries that are not necessarily seeing eye to eye with the US. So you can say such things on RT, you can say such things on Press TV, which is in Iran, you can say such things on CGTN, which is Chinese. And that's all.
And on Al Jazeera too.
Not even Al Jazeera. Al Jazeera to an extent. Al Jazeera, where it concerns Israel.
David, what now is what I've noticed. If you are very much interested in hearing other people's perspective on a particular subject, and you're tired of consuming the same material you're consuming, and especially when you have doubt around the information that is being curated for you to see, I think you then start to listen to or to watch most of these other outlets that you've mentioned, and you start to see where the contrast and where the similarities lie in how they disseminate the content of the information they disseminate, how they're also presenting this information to you. Because I think that was actually that was made visible, especially when Elon took over Twitter. Because I just began to notice that it looks like on Twitter, now X, it's like an information floodgate just opened. I regularly would not necessarily see anything positive about China on my timeline. I would not see anything positive about any other superpower, or would I say any other country that's in some sort of economic competition with the US. But right now, it's just totally different. Even information around the ongoing wars that are currently going on right now. If it was in the days of Jack, half of the information that we're currently seeing right now, you will definitely not see. If you go on Facebook, very, very limited chance you will see different perspectives and different narratives for you to actually say, you know what, who is telling the truth? What should I consume from here? What should I consume from here? And what should I ditch? I think that is that's the mindset, especially when you're not necessarily present in most of these countries, or you've not actually visited these countries, or you don't have contact in those countries. I believe that is the approach we should generally follow in terms of finding out, in terms of fact finding. And I'm glad that David mentioned all these other platforms, because people just tend to limit themselves to what I say American news outlets. They just believe CNN is the best, Fox is lying, or Fox is the best, CNN is lying. It's always between those two, and never really about what other perspective or what other ideas or narratives are out there that I'm not being exposed to.
I'll also mention that. So I just posted a tweet on the Jumbotron. I had posted it before it disappeared. I don't know why. I've just tried to post it back. And it's a very important tweet to look at, because I think Ewoma also mentioned something along the lines, well, these Western media companies are private. They are not government run. So somehow that in and of itself makes them better. Let me correct that very, 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 very bad misconception. Yes, they are private in that they're corporate owned, but they are very much government run. in that the people at those places, the important people, the people who make the decisions, the people who write editorial policy, the journalists in many cases, these guys are all government or ex-government. So the tweet that I pinned, I think it shows there's the journalist who was responsible for putting out the so-called Twitter files that Elon Musk gave him, Matt Taibbi. He did this investigation where he showed that something like 60% of the contributors and journalists at MSNBC, which is one of America's biggest news networks, are all, intelligence, civil servant types. They came from the government directly into media. So all they are doing is just repeating the government line. So the fact that it's quote unquote private doesn't mean that it has an independent editorial policy. Absolutely not. So, and the fact that we think that something is Western and private means that it's independent. That in itself is proof of that brainwash. Because if I were to have said that something is private and it's Chinese, you'd have said, well, it doesn't matter whether it's private, because once it's Chinese, the Chinese government has influence. You know that because US media told you that. It's not a lie, it's true. The Chinese government does have influence in everything in China, same as the Russians. But guess what? The US government also has the same influence in US media. They just are not the ones who are going to tell you that. And that's the point I keep making. You need a multiplicity of perspectives. You can't stick on what CNN has told you and think you are informed. You are not. And one thing this the white guys specifically are very good at doing is filling your head with a lot of information to give you the idea that you are informed. So they over-report, they over-analyze specific things, and you become very, very, very versed. You fill your head with a lot of English and a lot of useless knowledge. Meanwhile, you're as misinformed as anybody because they have only given you half of the information and they've souped it up with plenty of English. So yes, those things they told you about Russia and India and China, many of those things, if not most of them, are probably true. But who is telling you about their own? And that's the point I'm making. If you're coming from a global South perspective, an African, a Nigerian perspective, you are trying to build your own civilization. You are trying to build your own superpower. Is that not the goal? Or is the goal to integrate into the American superpower? Is that what the goal is? The goal is to build your own. And if you're going to build your own, you understand that in and of itself, necessarily, that means that sooner or later, you are going to come into conflict with the existing powers. That's just how power works. There's no new power that develops and the existing powers are like, oh yeah, that's fine. That's brilliant. We've seen the trade secretary of the US, Janet Yellen, come out and say a few months ago, very openly in front of TV cameras. You can check this out on YouTube, where she was being asked about the ongoing war in the war of microchips between the US and China. So for those of you who don't know, the most advanced microchips in the world are made by a company called TSMC, which is based in Taiwan. Taiwan is basically a US vassal. So TSMC is basically a Western company. They make the most advanced microchips in the world. And basically, whoever controls the cutting edge of microchip technology controls the cutting edge of global technology, basically. So they make nanochips with, I think they make 5 nanometer nanochips, which is like the global cutting edge. And Janet Yellen was being asked that, how is she going to ensure that China doesn't overtake that level of technology soon? And she said very openly in front of a TV camera that there are 2 ways of doing this. One way is to run faster than the other guy. That's to make sure that your own research and development is so good that you keep on, from 5 nanometers, you go down to 3 and maybe 2. Or the other option, and then she beckoned at some guy here, and that he's working on that. The other option is to stop the other guy from running fast. She said this on live TV. But basically, their job is to stop China from accessing technology. Their job is to stop China from developing 5 nanometer microchips. She said this in the open. That's how these people operate. But obviously when they are broadcasting CNN International to your bedroom in Maryland, Lagos, that's not what they're going to show you. That's not the part they will show you. All they will show you is the parts where the US has supremacy in the microchip wars, and the parts where maybe China stole intellectual property from them. What they won't show is the hundreds of times they have stolen from other people. and the several underhanded things they have done all over the world. Have you ever seen on an American TV or news or media channel anywhere that I think during the 60s or was the early 70s when India was having its nuclear program, when India was trying to develop its nuclear energy program, it was trying to develop its atomic bomb. The head of the research effort at the time, the Indian guy, his plane was bombed by the CIA. He was flying a passenger plane. He wasn't flying private. The plane was bombed. Dozens of people died, civilians, collateral damage because they wanted to get one guy to stop India from developing similar technology to them. Have you ever seen that on any Western platform before? But you can Google it. It happened. So the point I'm making is nobody on the planet is any kind of saint. Let's be very clear about this. So this thing that the Americans specifically have been very successful at doing, which is setting themselves up as some sort of moral standard. That we are the clean ones, and we have First Amendment, we have freedom of speech. It's all bullshit. It's not true. It's only children that believe it. We are supposed to be rational African adults here. So please let's stop thinking like children, right? Our only existential purpose is to grow. And you grow by interacting with as many people as you can, trading with as many people as you can, gathering as much information from as many sources as you can. If that means developing closer relationship with North Korea, so be it. So again, let's not get tied up in this thing about, oh, this person worked with RT before. This person is so fucking what? I've appeared on RT multiple times. I've appeared on Press TV, which is Iranian TV. Next week, I'm going to be appearing on IRINN, which is the Islamic Republic of Iran National News. Yes, the same way I've also appeared on Journal, which is French. I've appeared on CNN. I've appeared on Al Jazeera. Again, that's the point of being African. You are sovereign. You are free to engage with as many points of view as you can. There is no rule where it's written down in any Bible anywhere that if it's not something that one white or guy in Washington approved, then there's something wrong with it. That's how a slave thinks.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, David, for that contribution. And I like the last thing that you said. Talking about and I believe that is why, associating African Stream with Kremlin, I think that was the agenda, to make sure people stayed away or were afraid of engaging, consuming, either retweeting or liking contents from African Stream or Africa Stream. That is the intent, so that when people then become ashamed of associating with African Stream. And I believe that anyone who is of right mind, who has access to information, who can think critically, will be able to say, you know what, this is all an agenda to make sure that African voices or the African narrative is not being pushed, and that people do not listen to African narratives on the global stage. So next we'll have Eyewitness. Thank you for joining back. I see I was hoping to listen to you, but you went off stage for a while. I'm glad you're back. So if you can speak to the topic of the room, which is African narratives in a censored digital space, and that's off the back of African Stream being censored across YouTube and Meta platforms, that's Instagram and Facebook, we'd appreciate it. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much. David, what's up? How you doing? I can feel your I don't know how to say it, whether you're angry or not, but that is how it goes. Um, we are in a crucial moment right now, on a crossroad to be precise. I think this also have to do with the African continent, which is about pushing for a permanent seat at the Security Council, and these are all distractions because the United States is behind everything that we are seeing that is unfolding in Africa, be it terrorists, be it whatsoever. When you have an alternative news like African Stream, so they see it as a threat. So far as I'm concerned, we are about to have a true permanent seat at the Security Council. And the United States is going around saying that they are the one who are pushing for this. And I remember it was tabled by the Sierra Leonean government for Africa to have a two-seat at the Security Council. And now they are going around saying they are the one who are pushing for this. And we're having a two-seat at the Security Council without a veto power. It's like always a spectator at the table. So it makes no sense to me. So I just wanted for you to just elaborate on this, and it is important you bring it up so people will know exactly what are their agenda. And they are using somebody like us also to push this agenda, which is Linda Greenfield Thomas. She was in Africa, especially in Liberia. She served as an ambassador. So she is one of the dangerous people that we have right now. So kindly elaborate, please, if you can enlighten us in regards to the Security Council status of African countries. Thank you.
Okay, so I will try and be as brief as possible and as pack as much information as I can into a short space of time, because I'm not trying to monopolize this space. So generally speaking, what people need to know is that the UN Security Council is basically where the decisions are made regarding war. So how it tends to work is if I think there are 5 permanent members, if I remember correctly, of the UN Security Council. Feel free to correct me if I'm wrong. And these permanent members each have something called a veto. So basically, sorry?
Veto power, yeah.
Yeah. So basically, if a decision is made to, for example, deploy peacekeepers or soldiers or whatever in a particular place, or to there's a UN vote to take some particular action in a sovereign country, the countries with veto power have the power to basically vote it down. So if all 5 countries do not agree, because maybe Russia or China use their veto power, then that thing cannot happen. So that veto power is a very important part of what keeps the world relatively safe. Because without that veto power, basically, countries will be invading other countries unilaterally. But because there has to be a process, and then there's a council that has people that have veto power on it, that helps to keep certain warmongering interests in check. Now, Africa apparently is being pushed to get a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, because Africa doesn't have a permanent seat on the UN Security Council. Of all the world's most populated continents, I'm made to believe, okay, I think South America also doesn't have permanent seats. So I think it's Africa and South America, I think, don't have permanent seats on the UN Security Council. So Africa is being pushed to get a permanent seat, but instead of getting a permanent seat with veto power, which is the point of having a permanent seat, the proposal being pushed by the US is that Africa should have a permanent seat without veto power. In other words, you should have, it's like being a music artist, but instead of making any money from your record sales or touring or whatever, all your job is just to go and sing and dance, perform in front of people, be a superstar, but behind the scenes you're a church rat. That's pretty much what they want for Africa. So have the form of power but don't have the substance, have the appearance but don't have the teeth, which defeats the entire purpose of having a permanent seat. Because bear in mind, if Africa had a permanent seat, sorry, someone's mic is not muted. Yeah, you need to mute, sorry. If Africa had a permanent seat on the UN Security Council, say in 2011, for example, the NATO invasion of Libya couldn't have happened. That's a permanent seat with a veto. The only reason that invasion could happen at the time was because basically there was nobody to really speak for Africa. So using the guys that I mentioned earlier, that thing called responsibility to protect, then NATO was able to sort of get its way, and find a pretext for invading Libya and completely destroying that country, which has led to all sorts of consequences for us in Nigeria. Because prior to 2011, I'm sure I don't need to tell anybody, Boko Haram wasn't really a thing. They would bomb a building here and there, but they were very geographically confined at that time. After Gaddafi's fall, when the Sahel was flooded with weapons from his armory, from its armories, several armories, then we started suffering, and then thousands of our people started dying. So that was a direct result of Africa not being able to speak up for itself at the UN because it doesn't have a permanent seat with veto power on the UN Security Council. So basically, if Africa is going to get a permanent seat, that permanent seat has to come with veto power. And the country that is at the forefront of trying to remove veto power from the proposed permanent seat for Africa is, no prizes for guessing, some people's favorite country. So yeah, I'll leave it at that.
Thank you so much, David, my guy.
So Damien, are you there? Okay.
Ewoma, please go ahead.
Oh, okay. No,
Actually,
okay.
Sorry, just give me a second. We have Kenny and Chuka Fax who'd like to speak. Let's have Kenny go, and then after Kenny goes, Chuka will go, and then Joshua. Kenny, please go ahead.
Yeah, thank you. I think I don't have statements anymore. Thank you. Woma spoke my mind. My question is for David. Since we all agree that India is doing the right thing on the way they are holding the West, Russia, and China, and mostly all for the good of their own country. But at the same time, you can see they are not in a fight or shouting death to America to achieve all of that. And mostly, and most of their success is also coming from the West. The people they've been able to produce from the West, from US, being a CEO of many world-leading companies as we speak today. So, but then Africa is like, it's either this or that, the way the government is behaving. I mean, I don't even know how to give the government any responsibility because they are not doing anything good. So my question is, can we still achieve something like India without, shouting death to, and I'm just being extreme. I'm not saying that Hyundai is suggesting that anybody on this space, but it's saying, okay, let's dish the West, so that we can so how can we balance it in taking advantage of, from everywhere, just like India, without, being like as if we are anti-West in doing so? That's my question, David. Thanks.
You're only proving my point even further because I never said anything about being anti-West or saying death to America. But the fact that that's where your mind went to shows the success of the US.
No, David, my mind didn't go there.
No. I have to finish because
how they organize people to
if someone says that a country needs to be non-aligned and needs to treat all countries similarly, whether Western or Eastern, and then your immediate worry is, let that not come across as offensive to some certain group of people. Let that not come across as this. Then that shows even the fear that is implied in that type of thinking. It already says a lot. And let me also correct the impression that India is not anti-anybody. India is very anti-British, for one thing, extremely, very much so. And if you're familiar with their history, you know why. So they might not say death to America, but they say death to the UK, which is not too not too far off. So let's just put that aside. And then also the idea that India has a lot of successful immigrants in the US. Therefore, that in itself, in and of itself, represents a success for India. It's simply not true. Those people are American citizens. They're not Indians. They don't live in India. The most they can do for India is maybe they can send some business process outsourcing work to Delhi and Mumbai. That's the most India can get out of them. So India's primary success doesn't come from having a successful diaspora. Nigeria also has a successful diaspora. How has that helped us? India's primary success comes from the fact that the reforms that were done around 1990-1991 under their then head of state, Narasimha Rao, made India open to foreign investment. And as a result, India has become basically a global leader in software tech. And then it's then compounded by the fact that next door to India is China, which is the global leader in hardware tech. So basically, that has created this incredible tech cluster in Asia. That's actually where the quote unquote success of India comes from. It has nothing to do with the fact that it has a successful migrant population in the US and Canada. So being on friendly terms with, like, nobody is saying that a prerequisite for development is being belligerent or being unfriendly toward the West. Nobody's saying that. But the point is that being friendly with the West, or being, okay, friendly is not the word, being aligned with the West is not a prerequisite for development. And in fact, in the case of Africa, it's quite the opposite. Because this is a government that has made it very clear. It's in writing. Its vision for Africa, the purpose of Africa as per US foreign policy, is for Africa to remain the place where cheap industrial outputs are sourced from. I'm not sure people understand what the import of that is. Because if where you come from is where cheap industrial inputs are sourced from, and there must never be any beneficiation that takes place where you are, that means that you are forever destined to be poor. So if saying that you don't want to be poor and you want beneficiation to happen where you are, instead of people just rapidly, digging resources out of your ground and taking them to the coast and shipping them elsewhere, if you're saying that you want specialization, you want industrialization, you want, cheap energy, you want to actually have a good life where you are, if that comes into conflict with the US idea for what it wants you to be, so which one is now supposed to take priority? Is your ambition for yourself now supposed to be less important to you than not wanting to, quote unquote, shout death to America? Which one should be more important to you? So frankly, whether I'm shouting death to America or not is not the issue. If death to America will help me, will help me toward my development, I will buy a megaphone and shout it from the rooftop, and nobody will beat me, right? But if it's not going to do that, then I'll focus on what I need to. The point I'm making is that we need to stop focusing on how somebody is going to feel or how somebody is going to interpret what we are trying to. That's the success of India. The success of India is that India sees itself primarily as a country that is concerned with India, not as a country that is concerned with not being anti this or pro that. India is first and foremost Indian. So as Africans, are we first and foremost African, or are we concerned about being aligned with a certain group of people or not being aligned? Is that what the primary consideration is? That's the point I'm trying to make. It seems like the point isn't getting through yet.
It got through, David. What makes the whole thing complicated is no matter, even if we build that mindset, with having a useless leaders as we have today, how can we even get to that? Because I believe India has somebody that had a good will to get them there. But with having the kind of people that we have today, no matter the mindset that we develop, and I encourage us to develop the kind of mindset that you're preaching about, but how can we even start to get there with the type of, useless leaders we have, that is not helping in any way? I think that's, still waters down, no matter what the mindset that we build, the effort that we make as ordinary individuals, and then it gets to where it's supposed to be implemented, which is by the government or by the leader of African countries, and everything got thrown out. Which way, outside of that? And that's my last question I will drop. Thank you so much.
I don't think anybody needs to tell us what needs to be done. After all, when the Indians were going through their own transition between the end of the 1980s and the start of the 1990s, nobody needed to tell Indians what to do so as to get some form of progressive leadership. So this idea that, we're so helpless, these are, like, every time we're trying to have a conversation about moving forward as a people, somehow that always finds its way in. That, poor, woe is us because we have these terrible leaders and we can't do anything about it. And, we're so unfortunate and we're so unlucky and it's just so bad. That's not, like, I'm not really interested in any of that, right? If we actually do have that mindset, then nobody's going to tell anybody what needs to be done. I'm not going to stay on, say things that will potentially put me in trouble. on this Twitter space, but we know the things that other people have done elsewhere when they decided to get serious with themselves. So this idea that, oh, Nigerian leaders, they are aliens that fell down from the sky and they're completely untouchable and there's nothing we can do for them, there's nothing we can do to them. You and I know it's not true. The point is that the Nigerian people, by and large, haven't yet decided that they want to grow yet. The day they make that decision, the day there's a catalyzing event that makes people make that decision, nobody's going to tell anybody what to do. And nobody's going to be crying that we have bad leaders. Because I think we know, we've known for a long time that we have bad leaders. It's not a secret. Everybody knows it. So the day we decide that we're tired of having those bad leaders, we will know what we're going to do, whatever that something is. And we've seen what other people have done. Even in our neighborhood in West Africa, we've seen what other people have done. So the day we decide that we're ready, that will be the day. Until then, well, let's keep saying that our leaders are bad, isn't it?
Thank you very much, David, for that. I believe Chukofax has not spoken. After Chukofax goes, then we'll have Joshua. And let's keep it down to 3 minutes so that we don't talk for too long. And I think we'll be wrapping this up in the next 10 minutes. David has been gracious enough with his time, and we definitely appreciate his presence. So let's make it quick so that we can wrap this up. Chukofax, please go ahead.
Yeah, I'm going to make it quick. Thank you for allowing me to speak. Appreciate all the work you're doing, David, Aproko TV, my guys from Clubhouse. I follow. One thing that really annoys me is when a lot of Africans ask why certain things are happening in their country. It's triggering, honestly. Oh, why aren't we creating, an industrial base? Why don't we have power? Why is there so much corruption? It's annoying because we don't realize that what's actually happening is planned. I've realized this because I've started to just observe the level of stupidity in a lot of the policy decisions from Nigeria, from other African countries. And I realized a lot of this shit is planned. If African countries were to grow, that means that the value of our land, the value of our resources will grow. That means that workers will demand more, higher wages, et cetera, which means it'll be extremely expensive for a lot of these foreign powers to extract many of our resources. That's just one take I have. And I don't know why we keep on asking why, when we should be we should understand that a lot of this stuff is being planned. The degeneracy, the rampant tribalism, all of these people are paid actors. A lot of these politicians are put in place to make sure that a lot of these countries are not growing. It's planned. We shouldn't be asking why these things are happening. What we should be doing is understanding that they're planned and figuring out a way for us to create plans that will circumvent what they are trying to do. What Tinubu is doing is not him being a bad leader. He's there to purposefully fuck up Nigeria. It's planned. Whenever during the election, whenever we went, I think it was Atiku that went to the court in Illinois. I forgot where he went to, and he was asking for those papers to be released. David was a part of that whole movement. They didn't release it because it was planned. So a lot of these things are not happenstance. A lot of these things are not just bad leadership or bad governance or whatever. These are planned efforts by, orchestrated partly by outside forces to keep us down. So once we understand that they're planned, we should figure out how are they doing this and then circumvent it. And I would like to ask David, what are some things, what ideas you have to figure out how to circumvent a lot of these planned efforts to keep Nigeria down? That's one side. Another question I have is, and you kind of spoke to it a little bit. Africans, we tend to be fucking cowards. Excuse my language. We tend to be so afraid of the West. We have these kind of dramatized reactions in our head whenever we try to exert our independence. We feel like they're gonna just invade us and genocide a billion of us, or we just have these kind of super exaggerated, hyperbolic type of reactions, when a lot of times that's not what really happens. And I'm realizing that we have these kind of things in our head because we're just afraid, and we have an inferiority complex. We honestly don't think that we're equal to the white man. And as a result, we don't think that we should be able to exert our own independence in the same way that other countries exert their own independence, right? And it's a problem. It is not just a problem with our populace, but it's also a problem with our leadership, because the leaders in these countries come from the population. Overall, we tend to think that we're inferior. That's why whenever David is talking, somebody will say, "Oh, how we got to make sure we don't have an anti-American kind of stance." And in my mind, I'm like, "What? Like, when are we going to realize that we are also independent? We have our own agency, and we can exert our own agency. How do we prepare our people for that? And on top of that, like, how do we just shed this kind of weak inferiority mindset that we have so that we can really exert ourselves on the world stage instead of always kind of fear mongering ourselves to be kind of subservient and accept this kind of subservient kind of status that we have, you know? You talked about it. Obviously, there's things that you cannot mention, like you said, but I just wanted to say that, like, we should stop with this kind of mindset of fear of we should only work with white people. We cannot work with these other people because we don't want to be sanctioned by white people and stuff like that. When I mean white people, I'm talking about, NATO, the EU, and all their different, international institutions. So I just wanted to kind of put that out there, that we shouldn't have this kind of mindset. So yeah, that's my comment. Let me end it right here.
Thank you very much, Chuka, and it's great and nice to hear your voice again. And I think actually about this cowardice that you mentioned, I think it's mostly a West African problem. I don't think it's generally a problem of all of Africa. Mostly West Africa, would I say Central Africa? I think that's where we definitely see that problem. North Africans really do not have any problems, would I say, necessarily speaking truth to power and holding their governments accountable and doing what they have to do to get their countries right on track and also to protect their sovereignty. I think that's what Nigeria lacks now, because and David and a host of others, they've already put out what's wrong, what needs to be done in several languages, sometimes twisting their tongues, holding themselves back not to say too much that would probably put them in trouble. But I think at the end of the day, the onus is on Nigerians to take their country back, and I think that's what's left when Nigerians when they're tired of the status quo. Because what we can see now is that Nigeria is almost becoming a vassal state. Um, we've seen instances when the FBI will put out, and people will not necessarily look at it that way, but when you see publications about records of Tinubu, or would I say Tinubu, the president, being released or probably being released or being considered to be released, it's more like they're just reminding the occupier of Aso Rock that things can actually go left if you do not toe the line. They're reminding him that they hold the cards, and if he does not put their interest first or put American geopolitical interest first, that he will face the music. And that's the problem with having someone in Aso Rock who can easily be blackmailed, because at every turn and at every point in time, they will always be forced to put external interest above Nigerian interests. And you can see that currently playing out with all the increasing taxes that are being imposed by the administration. Nigerians are complaining, but every 2 days when you wake up, there's one tax. The next thing you see now, there will be tax on the air we breathe. So, these are the problems that we deal with, and this is what platforms like Aproko TV and African Streams. These are the narratives, or these are the items that they try to push out there, so that a lot of African youths are very much aware of what's going on, and that you're not just watching geopolitical news and thinking that those things that are happening in isolation. No, they're all connected and impact our lives one way or the other. So let's just pay attention. So we'll move over to Joshua. Joshua, thank you for being patient, and thanks for joining. You have 3 minutes. Please go ahead.
Okay, thank you for giving me the opportunity to speak. I would like to ask David a question before I go any further. If you've read the book Confessions of an Economic Hitman, if you have, what is your take on that book in particular?
Okay, so I've read the book, but I'm not sure to be honest, I'm not trying to be impolite here, but I'm not sure I really see the point of that question, because I think this has been done to death already. There's nothing in the book which is a lie. It's all true, and we all know that it's true. So, I mean, what exactly is it that we need to talk about again?
Okay, sorry, I was just trying to get your thoughts. Anyways, it's fine. It's something I would want to, or a book I want to recommend to a lot of Nigerians, and Africans in general. But I'll just go to my own thoughts to share with everyone. For me, I feel like the first problem we have is the lack of unity. I don't see any, because I mean you and the host have David, especially, you made it clear that when we are ready to do what needs to be done, we'll do what needs to be done. But I realize that there's a lack of unity amongst us, as Nigerians. There's a lot of division. People have divided opinions, perspectives. There's a lot of tribal, ethnic driven, division amongst us. And like the scripture says, I think Jesus that even was telling some of the Pharisees when they said he was using, sorcery to heal people. And he asked them that if a kingdom is divided against itself, can that kingdom stand? Like, it's a universal principle. You can't stand if you are in division or you are not united. So I really wanted to just emphasize that, lack of unity, and how that is really going to be our biggest drawback in taking back, control. Because I'm sure if a lot of people, I mean, look at the end bad governance protests. Some people were like, oh no, we can't do it. Some people were like, well, let's specify what we want to ask the government for. Some people were like, well, let's ask them for everything. Some people were like, well, let's ask them to step down. And some people were like, that's not possible. You can't ask the government to step down. And some people were like, why not? So while we were busy fighting ourselves, and a few people coming out to protest and a few people not coming out, some people say they don't believe in it. Some say Igbos are sitting down to, to just chill. Um, the government is there just laughing at the rest of us, watching us being silly. So I was going to ask, I think David is gone, but I was going to ask, what, or if anybody has an idea of how we can actually be united, have a united front first before we even decide to say we want to go up against powerful entities that be. Because if we are not united, in another 100 years, we'll still be exactly where we are right now. And that's what I wanted to say. Thank you for having me, Aproko.
Yeah, thank you very much for speaking. Eric, would you like to say something? And if Eric isn't here, then Darren, you can go ahead.
Okay, thank you. I mean, when he was speaking and asking that question, so this is the analogy that popped into my head. Do we really think that when, like, the slaves in the US were going to, when they were having all of that revolt, do we think that it was every slave in every plantation that just, decided, they just slept one night or had a meeting one night and all just decided with one voice that, what, we've had enough and we're all going to fight slavery? I don't think, except if, I think that kind of thing happens in the movies. I think really it always just takes a spark, and then it takes a sustained spark. It could be just a little group of people that just decide that, what, we've had enough and then they begin to spread it out. And that's why if you would see that basically every revolution that has happened, it always just takes a group of people. And then that group of people keeps, fanning the embers of like their passion. Do you understand? Until like other people catch it and then it catches on. Really, the French Revolution, you find the same thing. The um Arabic, basically every single revolution on the surface of the earth. And even like if you look back, on history, like I don't think if we wait that, we're going to get to a point where, sort of we're all going to just come to a consensus, in Nigeria, and all the tribes are going to say, you know what, we all now love each other, and then we'll now use that one to now fight. I don't think there's ever going to get to that point. I think it just takes, individuals to decide that, you know what, I've had enough. I'm going to look for like-minded people, and then we're going to look for like-minded people. But to wait till we are in some sort of unity, I don't think that's ever going to happen. We would have people like the area top man of this world just decide that even if it's just me, I'm going to do as much as I can by myself. And then you would find that when you have that kind of mindset, you will keep meeting people like you. You would then be able to form some sort of network, have some sort of underground, and then, you would start to use that to liberate other slaves. I think that's always how we has worked in every, work for freedom. But to say everybody will come together in some sort of unity, I think that's like, not even every movie, because you have all genres of movies, right? That's like fairy tale, like strictly. That's my opinion on that.
Yeah.
Can I speak? I just wanted to say something real quick. Can you hear me?
Yeah, Chuka, can you give it a second? Let's have God's will alone for Nigeria, and then we can continue. The individual here for a while and would like to speak. God's will, please go ahead. In 3 minutes. Thank you.
All right. Thank you very much, Africa TV. Can you hear me very well, please?
Yes, we can. Thank you for joining.
Oh my God. My Bluetooth just went off. I hope I'm still being heard very well.
Yes, we can hear you loud and
Great.
clear.
Greetings, everyone. D-Derry, thanks a lot in absential. I greet everyone in this space. And then I want to greet Anthony Blinken, or what's his name again? I want to greet him specially for helping us sell African stream, because someone like me, I don't think I know that name before. And via his whatever right now, I've known about African stream, and I'll say thanks to him, because I know a lot of millions of Nigerians and even older Africans who doesn't know about African stream before now know that there is something called African stream. And to some of us that knows some of the little things that goes around, we now understand that for him to go on attacking African stream the way he did means that that platform is really talking for us as Africans. So I give him a very big thank you for that. I want to start here by saying, beside that, I want to say that as Africans, going by all that is going on, especially in our continent today, I think we need to start unlearning some of the things we've learned over the years, decades that we've been running with. Things like, inasmuch it's said by a white man, it is 100% true. Even if hundreds of Africans like they should say otherwise, it is that which the white man says or said that is complete. We need to start unlearning some of these mentality if really we need to move on. The topics here are very great, but I want to talk about the failed state 2030. When I saw what David put up, I was really busy. And to some that knew, I just buried my mother less than 2 weeks ago. So I've not really been doing much on social media. But when I saw that post, I took out time to read every of those documents. And I had to 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 pick out a paragraph. And that paragraph was the paragraph that talked about our Muslim brothers whom they intend to use to disrupt and destroy their nation unknown to them. And if you go through those documents, you will agree with me that nearly 80% of what is written there have happened already. They've happened. Today, we see companies running away from Nigeria. We see investors leaving Nigeria to other smaller countries to go and invest. According to that document, it will get to a place where the weak government will search for fund and there will be nobody willing to give to them. And of course, the World Bank and the IMF that is giving them loan currently at a time will stop. And that will be the time the anarchy will now step in. And to the Muslim brothers who be thinking they are fighting for their religion, we're like, no matter what happens, these guys have to stay. And according to that document, that will bring the total collapse of our country. And that is not good for us. So, fellow Nigerians, I don't know how we're going to do this, but I thank God for the likes of Dambello, who is now using Hausa to interpret some of these things that are going on to our northern brothers, and they are hearing these things. I hope he goes through those documents and do some, stuffs like he usually do about them. And for us on this space, someone was like, how are we going to get to these people? Like the Derek just talked about it now. She really doesn't think everybody can, hear it. But please, there is something we say in Urobo, unutakunu. Mouth tell mouth. You hear this information, pass it on to another, and that person you've spoken to will pass it on to another, and before you know it, a group of persons will catch the fire and things will begin to happen. These Western people, they mean nothing good for us. We are only useful to them because of our resources. Our resources is really, really their target. We saw what happened when Nigeria drove France away from their continent, from their country. In matter of weeks, France was in total darkness. One of the news I saw on YouTube, the people selling frozen chickens and the rest were all complaining that they lost a whole lot of money. Now they get this uranium from Nigeria. And the Nigeria that gives them the uranium that gives them light does not have light. And for just few weeks that were like, we can't do this anymore. We want to get benefit from what comes out of our soil. And we are no longer doing it your way unless you have to come to the table. Let's talk. And look at what they went through. In that news, they said that all the generators in France were bought even up to lighters. I want to believe some of you here saw that news. Up to lighter, the whole place, businesses were going down. That is the power we hold as Africans. And these guys are doing everything to make sure that we do not enjoy what God has given to us. So for every means that that we have to tell ourselves the truth, to galvanize ourselves, to enlighten ourselves to the real thing that is on ground, and start helping us to unlearn what they've deceived us to learn over the years. They are trying to silence everything. So, fellow Nigerians, as I ran up, please and please, if you have not read that document talking about 2030, please go and read it. Talk to somebody, and that person will talk to another person. And by God's grace, I believe if we can do this, prayerfully and working, because the Bible says faith without work is dead. As we work, we pray for God's guidance and everything. I believe we will pull through this. And by His grace, we will be alive to enjoy the Nigeria and Africa of our dream. At the end of the day. So I want to say a very big thank you to David for all things he has been doing, for those documents, those investigations he's been doing. It is my prayer that God will protect him so that we will all enjoy the Nigeria he is working tirelessly for. Thank you very much, everyone. I yield.
Oh, thank you very much for your contribution. God's will alone for Niger. That was a brilliant submission. For everyone who is looking for the article she's speaking about, the report she's speaking about, you can find it on the Jumbotron there. If you just click on the first link that you see, there was a 2011 study by the US Air Force arguing that Nigeria will be a failed state by 2030. They recommended that America should militarily encircle Nigeria just in case. And it also says, with Niger and the tension in West Africa, around West Africa, do you think this is possible? Also within that tweet, you can see the PDF, a link to, that's what a Google Drive link to the PDF. I think you can download it from that link so that you can have a local copy of that report. And if you look at that report, you can definitely see that most of the things that are being alluded to or called out within that report, it's almost like a coincidence. I won't call it a coincidence, but a mirror of exactly what is currently going on in Nigeria in terms of our political stability, in terms of our economic stability, in terms of security, in terms of infrastructure. You can see that, the report somewhat aligns with what's currently going on, and I believe that is why David brought up that report again. I think that report has been shared a couple times on social media, and I believe with David's following, that report came to the attention of more people. A few people have seen this before and have been talking about it, and that's also the basis of the involvement of a lot of Nigerians, especially in geopolitics and what's currently going on, especially within Nigeria. So I think people need to pay attention to what's currently going on, especially in geopolitics and what's happening in Nigeria. Just concluded election that just happened, because you can see that there's going to be a huge economic implication if the state of Nigeria fails. It's actually getting there, but I think sometimes Nigerians just assume that you can do things without any blowback of the consequences. For every reaction, or for every action, there's a reaction. And if the country is currently being mismanaged, if resources are not properly being managed, if the rule of law is not in place, which is very, very
Wait, is it just me? I'm not seeing. Okay.
I'm not hearing anybody.
Okay, well, yeah, I wasn't
Hello,
hearing.
yeah, I got disconnected. I got disconnected. So yeah, well, let's just have more voices go on. I thought it was Twitter doing it.
Damian, before the next voice goes, I want to
Yeah,
say
go ahead.
I want to say something about this CIA document that we are talking about and all that. Wasn't this predicated on observations at what is happening? Because I'm also going to take you to The Great Unraveling, written by Chris Nowodo in 2017. So, because the way that I'm hearing people talk about it, it's like it's like, people sat around in a dark room and were smoking their cigars and said, this is how we are going to destabilize these people so they will not, because at the same time, it's also at variance with what is happening with migration via the Sahara route. You're seeing European countries fund countries in North Africa to prevent, the excess migration that is coming from our quarters because of fundamental bad governance. So you're also seeing that. So I would like us to, like, when we're speaking about it, let's talk about different parts. So it's not like we're just talking about just one thing, because a Nigerian has also written about. I'm going to share the document with you in your DMs. Has also written about the disintegration of the Nigerian state because of our misgovernance, because of the amount of ungoverned spaces that exist. I mean, if you've ever heard Cheta Nwanze, who is the principal behind SBM Intelligence, who arguably has like one of the richest data troves on what do you call it? How do I put it? Security matters, social culture, African geopolitics, Nigerian geopolitics, whatever. Yes, he has also categorized. In fact, before the what do you call it? I think the kidnappings started or something, when it, like, before it's this banditry started, he categorically met the Nigerian defense, like, one of the arms, and told them, like, look, from what we are seeing right now at the moment, these things are going to get worse if you guys don't do anything. And the rest, they say, is history. So let's also put that into context, because we've had Nigerians that have written about what could happen if we continue on a certain trajectory. So because I'm still coming back to our own agency, because there is something like, yes, there is external subterfuge that exists in the world. It has always happened. Always. If you check through human civilization, from the times of the Greeks, Romans, Ottomans, whatever, these things have always been there. But there are countries that have been able to find their way. I mean, look at the way all of us are referring to India today. So I'm just trying to just make sort of like compartmentalize that. Look, yes, we've seen a document that people were making predictions about what could happen if because I read that thing well, if we enter some certain trajectories, because we are on the same platform that we've watched and listened to that conflicts for jihad and all that. We knew people that spent over $100 billion pushing certain ideologies from their corner of the world that reverberated to touch us. And it wasn't, the people that we are pointing fingers at right now. So Nigerians have also written about this. I don't want to just point that out. And Damian, I'm going to share that with you in your DM so you can share the jump for Trump, but go to go and read and all that. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much, Ewoma. And I think it's not necessarily like the confusion, but I think it's also because of how the topic was positioned. That's talking about the censorship of African streams, and then leading into the failed state report that David Hondeyin highlighted about or talked about. Yes, the report is based off of the would I say the observation within the Nigerian space, and how the economic instability, the absence of the rule of law, the impact of corruption, Nigeria's geopolitical history, and how that could actually influence Nigeria becoming a failed state by 2030. So it's not necessarily what they've planned out for Nigeria. Yes, there are external elements who always want to protect their own interests and will do what they think they need to do to protect their own interests. But there's also the Nigerian side where, the plans of these external entities do not necessarily have to come to fruition if if Nigerians in Nigeria put Nigerian interests first, and that stems from how we approach elections, how we approach politics, how we view politics. Because a lot of people view politics as a competitive space where there is no consequence for bad action, and that's not the case. We are currently seeing that right now in our political space. We are seeing the consequences of actions that were taken last year and the impact on Nigerian lives. Currently, we've seen the Maiduguri floods. It's not the US that or any Eastern or Western entity that went to Maiduguri and told the governor and his agencies over there not to take care of the dam, or not to make sure that disaster did not happen after inspecting the dam many times, and after agencies warned about the dam walls breaking down and the floods actually occurring. There's also going to be another flood coming very soon, I believe in October. Cameroon is going to open up their dam again. This opening of their dam happens every year, and yet the Nigerian federal government and then the affected state governments, that is the states that are always affected when the Cameroon dam is always open, they refuse to do everything from party to party, from year to year, from one governor to the next. So these are the issues, because there's almost no value for human life. Just recently, Tinubu himself donated rice to people whose lives and properties have been destroyed. There are certainly people who took loans from banks or who borrowed money from family members and friends to establish multi-million naira businesses or billion naira businesses, and the floods have destroyed their lives. A lot of people are dead. A lot of people cannot be accounted for. Now there's going to be a spread of waterborne diseases because of this flood. So, it's a two-part conversation. Maybe it shouldn't have been combined, but at the end of the day, it is what it is. So I'll just let the few speakers who are up here speak. Daniel Orji. After Daniel Orji goes, then we'll have Carl, and then we'll have Professor. You have 3 minutes each. I know I promised to wrap it up, but I can see there are a lot of people who requested to speak. So after the current requests that we have, we'll just wrap it up and we'll not be taking any new requests. So please go ahead, Daniel, and keep it to 3 minutes. Thank you.
No, okay. I thought I was going to speak, right?
Let Daniel speak. Daniel has been waiting. He's been on since David joined. So Daniel, please go ahead and make it quick. 3 minutes.
Okay, thank you very much. Can you hear me?
Yes, loud and clear. Go ahead.
Okay, all right. I'm Daniel Oji. I want to ask, as we are fighting for true independence in Africa, is there any plan for a kind of for us being independent in that way in terms of tech, like China now? Before the US could discover what is happening, China have already copied technology, also with India and some other countries that are not that dependent on them, that the US cannot raise shoulder and say that they intimidate them. Is there any plan for such? Then I want to make a kind of a contribution that we Africans should love ourselves, because a lot of experience I've had with my fellow Nigerians, that your fellow Nigerian will be treating you as though you are not a human. Like, I have worked for so many people that eat my money. You work for them, they will not pay you. They will deny you your pay, and they will still join issues with you. So I want us to have that love, because it's that love that will make us to fight for ourselves. When you work for somebody and somebody just deny you your pay, it doesn't as in it doesn't all go well with us. Before you know it, there will be chaos and we'll hate ourselves the more. If our politicians, although our politicians are being micromanaged by the foreigners, we can't follow the way they do things. Why I have not joined politics is because in my place, when I wanted to join, they said that politics is all about kill the person you are greater than. It doesn't matter whether it's your mother or any person that block your way, kill the person. So I just left and say, I can't do this. So let's love ourselves. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Daniel, for your submission. I'm sure that the Nigeria has a very vibrant tech community, and I'm sure that there are several people who are working towards building a very interesting social media platform that is built by Nigerians and operated in Nigeria. Obviously, the economic space in Nigeria has made a lot of has prompted a lot of companies, especially startups, to migrate or to move their headquarters from Nigeria to popular places like San Francisco in the US. And also because of the availability of capital for them to finance or to push their projects. But hopefully, as soon as Nigeria becomes stable under the right leadership, under proper governance, I'm sure that these platforms will rise. And that's why these platforms like X, Facebook.
My people, now well done. No greetings to all asundry. Life with Natu, I see you. Kene, I see you. Everybody, I see you all. I hope you guys are listening to this. I hope you guys took the time to listen to this. This is very important information. Okay, we have, they're trying to suppress the African streams and platforms, educating Africans. And African Stream actually is a Pan-African, what's it called, platform. I listen to some of the videos they push out. It's all about Africa. It's all about identify, your identity, history of Africa, and stuff like that. So it was really weird when they said, when not Blinken, they call him Senator Blinken, when he came out and he said what he said about you know, about the platform. It was quite surprising. This is why as Africans, all the tech gurus when we get, this is not time for una to really know what you know to build, at least build a platform that would allow Africans to express themselves to the fullest so that we can tell our own stories. Eh? This is why we need our own platforms. We cannot continue to rely on other people every time, But we don't have, probably say we don't get good leadership. That's not the biggest problem we get. That's not the biggest problem we get. We need to really wake up because the plan when these people get for us, it no good. Now we get the resources, now we dey suffer. It no make sense at all. We are not even, we know they find trouble. If you say you want, we are glad, we even go share with you because Africans generally are very generous. You never see Nigerian wey no dey generous. I never see Nigerian wey no dey generous. Nigerians are quick to share what they have, resources, even resources. It's all about negotiation, right? And mind you, those resources that we have in our soil, now our ancestors give us. We will not pretend and feel like saying we achieved it by ourselves. Now our ancestors. So we they allow strangers they come, they take away the energy source of that land. You know what that means? We need to get it right. Yeah? David Udeyi now, the guy everywhere is looking over his shoulder. He cannot, be in one place at once. I can't imagine living life like that. I cannot even imagine it. How long are we going to continue like this? Look at these journalists. Look at the African stream. We can't afford to lose those platforms. So we can't. I had to create a platform of Truth Social, Donald Trump's platform, because of Hussein. I had to, because I have to follow him because he always brings information direct. You understand? So please, if you can also find him on Truth Social and follow him, the man, he's always providing, he has been fighting, young man like that, carry this kind of heavy load. God. Anytime I think about David, I always offer prayers to him, send him good energy, ask for the Creator to protect him wherever he is. So I don't know. Mama Echo, welcome. Greetings to you.
Correct pikin.
How you dey? See your face, you dey shine o. You sure say no be lie you lie to me so? Your face dey shine. Welcome. It's so
Hey,
good to see you. I'm
as
happy
I
you
said,
are up.
we just start. You know what the Bible talk say? Your latter day shall be better than your beginning.
Yeah, that's true.
Omo yeah, and children's pickings there.
Yes.
Me and you people, our latter day will be better than our beginning.
He said.
I'm on a mission, I'm on a journey. When it comes to the economic war, I am on a mission to produce plenty heliumos in Africa.
He said.
Overtaking is allowed.
Absolutely.
And God say you rain too much. For the wuru when you do, now you take rain. As Africa waiting. Dangote, my children are overtaking. 3 months. 3 years before election. After election, my children are taking over.
He said.
Ìyá tó bí mi kò lè ṣohunkóhun láìsí ìrànwọ́ Olúwa.
Bẹ́ẹ̀ni.
All of una wanna sit down. Since I was born, ẹ̀rí ògo mi. You guys wanted to kill me by all means. Una went pursue me when I did 3 months. How far? Una went make me eat when I did 3 months for 6 months. 3 to 9 months, now not let me go toilets. How far? Ẹ̀yin ọmọ ẹ gbọ́ story. You guys that have written yourself up. That is why I don't write you off for ẹ̀yin ọmọ. One man of God when I respect so much. You know, say I don't respect all men of God do. But there is one when I respect. Make a first throw a salute. My very sister, Alima Abangida. You remember when you meet me in Resurrection Praise Chapel? You spoke for me for the first time. Yeah. Shey sabi say all those when they do igbe that they see. You sabi?
Sorry, what did you say?
All the people when they do igbe, majority of them they see, yes or no?
It be igbe. You mean traditional something?
Yes, all those when they worship.
Yeah, now you get of course the people who naturally have those types of gifts. Absolutely.
Some of them they see.
Mm-hmm.
Alima. You remember? Let me and you meet for Resurrection Praise Chapel for Africa for Alakija. 2009. When I become to only 6 weeks with Pale. His Eminency, Bishop Mustafa. Bishop Samson Mustafa Benjamin. Mama Alima, you can't look me. You say my daughter, my sister. You don't know who you be. You tell me, say I don't know who I be. Yes, you were right. I really don't know who I am. But today, I know now. You tell me, say, I be that kind of person. When they carried this big glory of destiny, they wanted to steal it, but they couldn't. They fought to collect it, but they couldn't. So they want to punish you. They now carry it and hang it. Mama, you know that day you speak Urhobo for me for the first time. Mama, you can't tell me, say, make I wait until Professor Mustafa Benjamin finish what he want to. Professor Samson Mustafa Benjamin. You remember the first time when you tell me, say, make I buy one way ticket in 05. I just obey you and Papa God. When I reach, I won't come back home. But God, too much. 3 months, he give me green card, he give me social security. I can ask myself, say, if I go Nigeria now, what I could tell people, say I come to. Hey, that I remember. I want to sing one song for all women. All ye mothers. This song, not Benin song. Oh my, yeah, you go help me chorus and small, not sabi too much.
I don't know Benin, no. I don't know how to speak Benin.
Imia mi yere, imia mi yere, imia mi yere. Imia mi yere, imia mi yere. Egani yere gabiere, orio wopa, orie ye imi, orio wopa, orie ya agbo megige o. Iye ne, imia mi yene o, imia mi yene, imia mi yene, imia mi yene, imia mi yene, egeni yene gabi na, orio wopa, orie ya gumi, orio wopa, orie ya agbo megige o, iye. This song is dedicated to you, all women. The song say, I will not forget my mother. I will never forget my mother. Because the day she gave birth to me, she put one leg in the spirit and another one in this world. And before you know it, I am in this world. Every woman that has given birth, you know that pain, that you travail in pain before you put forth. That's how you don't even there, In fact, the man when he do, you go kosa. My dear mother, I salute you. Wherever you are, I salute you for carrying this seed. Yeah. You know, when the battle of life was tough, when it seems as if I don't know what, when I was hopeless and I don't even know what is happening, there's something that I used to say to myself, that the day my pale and my male meet, biology say, pale, he pour plenty of that thing All of them come begin dey run, they run, me I dey run, they run, me I dey run. We want say go fertilize my mama. That thing, I run and I won the battle, and I won the battle. Then I said to myself sometime when things were tough, and I said to myself, in the beginning, you were able to run and outsmart every other one. That your papa poor, your mama only one enter, it busy, and that is you. So who are you there? And who are you that will listen to me later on? What is that you are going through? You are already a winner, because the day your pale and your man meet, the pale poor, una plenty, una they swim, una they run, una they swim, and you won the battle. So if that day you win this battle, who tell you say you're not going to win on that battle? Hey, go and discover yourself. The day you will win the battle of life and fulfill your original journey, and the day when you discover yourself. Not be waiting on these people, they talk. Even when the professor finish, you still need to go and discover yourself. Because if you don't discover yourself, now your life you go to live unfulfilled life. You be like me when I never marry. I like us, I never marry on my year. You know why? On my year, you know why? On my year. On my year, they hear me. Huh? You leave me for studio. On my year. Damilon, answer me. Now worry. I don't keep the remaining story for another day. All of them I go watch this story for my channel. Subscribe. Pay all free. Buy some coffee. Super chat and super chat. Because this story I'm not going to hear anywhere yet.
Sorry, Mama Echo. Sorry, I quick run go do something. You were calling me. I couldn't get to the. Sorry.
I don't
As you talk, I still leave you because when you dey in that mood like that, I'm not the like to interject you. Yeah,
you be like
you exhaust yourself so that you know go interject.
You be like
your mind.
Obieto don't understand me. You know, say, when I go down there,
I just leave you when you finish what you want to talk.
Even that rem when I
know somebody fight for top of platform.
Even that rem, I don't even know how to enter. I go just enter like this. Myself not sabi myself.
Sorry, I be they do something. I say make I could do something. Yeah.
I don't forget. I be they ask you one question when I want to continue, but it's okay.
Okay.
But the thing is, say all of you now, when you go listen to this, if I don't want to make my yet tag up for less special people, pay. The dollar sign day, even after this, the dollar sign day, make una pay because I not pay. I'm not going to hear anything. My yet plenty they grand. Nigeria, I want to send message. My you don't hear send me at Tinubu, don't they love ourselves?
You say anything?
Me at Tinubu, don't they love ourselves?
Okay, congratulations. So may you don't join the party. May you join. Maybe
I'm not joining.
You can't deliver them.
I'm not joining. No. I decided to love him, make him not love me. Because if I not love, I don't go collect what I want to collect.
Okay, good.
You don't say love. They say love can carry something.
Okay, I hear. Not true, not so they talk.
So he said, make at the beginning they talk the other way. Make his children come they fight me. And I know say I get to be like a boy to collect the things. Abi. I'm me where my children are in his hand. So I get to love him so that my children not go fight. Because okay, Male don't they love our oppressor. So let us begin to listen to Male.
Oh my God.
Abi?
Anything to release, make e release Nigerians. That na the thing.
To release us. Now we go release ourselves. And everything we want to release ourselves. Yeah.
He said he also do the releasing. It can come
Because
from him, it can come from us.
the
If you
first
wake
thing,
up now, you go say, okay, the pressure is too much. Let me leave. You know? So
you know why I love the man? You know, say during election, he give us opium. You know that they call opium, abi?
Wait be that.
Opium.
Opium?
Igbo.
Oh, okay.
But the
I
kind
don't
Igbo
follow
when
them
he
take and share, but yeah.
the kind Igbo when he give us, na Igbo of religious bigotry and tribal bigotry.
Yeah, that's true.
We can't take am. My city boy give up, we can't take am. He can't take am turn us so mumu. We can't rig election for am. We can't carry ballot paper for am. We can't scatter everywhere for am. Anywhere when LP they win, we go scatter am. Abi?
Now wetin people do be that. Yep.
So when he finish, he go say ẹ̀rí mo fún èmi fún yín ní epion ẹ̀dẹ̀ mú mo lò yín bí orange mo fẹ́ jù yín sílẹ̀ pátá. You now throw them down. Ṣé na Ṣèyí Tinubu na rig election for am? Ṣé na ìyá lọ́jà na rig election? Ṣé na Remi Tinubu na rig election?
Na Nigerians now. Na we.
Good.
Na who no man, na dey do man. Na rig the
So
election.
when we don't do am finish, when city boy, my darling city boy don take wetin he do, that's okay. Ẹ̀yin òmùgọ̀, you're evil. It is time for me to give una wetin I get for stock. That is why I told you people, I'm going to start from where Buhari stopped. And I am going to reduce your economic power. Oh my God, did he fulfill those two things or not?
I'm sure he did. I'm sure.
So, city boy is not a liar. Now we mumu them. Because, okay, in order to show you I am a city boy, he now cook breakfast for us. He now cook lunch for us. He can give us dinner. He now notice, some of the men, you are messing with my daughters. You know, think, what do I say? Let me give them pepper soup because men love pepper soup. He now decide to make sure, as a minister of Petilo will not be plenty, and if he plenty, when you fill your tank, you not go last. Before you know it, your money they vanish. So instead of going to the joint, to go and be milking my daughters, you cannot go and milking my daughters anymore. Abi, ọmọ yẹn. If I say you don't go cook again, make sure you bring my food though. So, man, no more lie, calling your wife. Oh, darling, I am not coming home on time. I am busy at work. What are you busy at work? Is it not my daughters you are busy at work? They press their bobby. They make them, they do like say they're not supposed to become a woman of their own. So, city boy, thank you for giving us all this breakfast, lunch, dinner, super. Because all of us, both in diasporas and the one in Nigeria, none of us the chopper. Some people they work double shift now because the demand from home is becoming heavy. And those food is meant to reset all our brain. Is your brain resetting Nigeria? Because if your brain is resetting, wọ́n ní ọ̀nà ọkọ̀ wọ́jà o, wọ́n rọ̀nà lítò market. my pikin Showore say na to come out in masses na go solve the problem. I support am. So join him and come out in masses. Anything from October 1st, come out in masses. Then the other one, pikin and uncle, my children are following Peter Obi. He said, no, let's wait for 2027. Correct. All of you that qualify to apply for the councillor to presidency, you know you qualify, you know the value that we brought to your value you must have. Apply, begin to submit. You go soon begin to submit application because I'm preparing an app that you will download to submit your application. I'm not going to talk about that one. Security ni ń ṣọ́jú yẹn lọ torí tí bá ti ṣọ́jú yẹn lọ títí boy àtàwọn ọmọ ẹgbẹ́kẹ́gbẹ́ jí sátẹ́jì mi àtàwọn ọmọ mi ń ṣọ́jú bẹ́ẹ̀ yẹn lọ o ọmọ yẹn ẹ bá mi dá ẹnu mi ké dá ẹnu mi ké dá ẹnu mi ké.
Thank you, Mama Echo. Thank you,
Thank you, my love.
Yeah.
Finally, city boy. Remi Tinubu, tell your husband, who is now my boyfriend, when you people go to the other room, where on the 24th, go there, so Uncle Win àtọmọ mi Nnamdi Kanu kò tú sílẹ̀. Láì jẹ́ bẹ́ẹ̀ yẹn, me and my children, we go play wetin they call last card. Checkmate. That card, nobody don't play in the history of Nigeria struggle. You know what? When you make me and my children to play my last card for you, I will not only demand for the release of Nnamdi Kanu, all my children wanna lock up or joyously. I know they collect the list, go publish the list for you. All of them in all the 36 states now go release that. I just tell you now. You people release all of them, including the one when he touched issue, when he still yam because he's hungry and when I lock up. I don't tell my children, man, they collect all the names that they give me. In case you know people that have such victim, people not gather. Because if we play the last card, all of them must be free. Because it is not unlike Nnamdi Kanu they go release. They go release this one because all this one go come become Jara. When you are growing up, when you buy something, you know they ask for Jara.
Anyway, thank you very much, Mama Echo. I appreciate. Yeah, thank you guys. So anyway, now here we go end them because now this video I bring come show of the hidden, expose on Africa stream. So if you did not watch it, please try and watch it from the beginning. For all my replay guys, please watch it from the beginning. Very vital information about this. And then Project 2030 is on David Hidden's page. You can go read it and see everything that they already listed has already played out. So anyway, now here I go end down with you now. We go see another time. Thank you very much, Mama Icho. Have a wonderful day. Rest, take your time. Take it easy. Thank you so much. I appreciate you. All right, everyone. Bye. See you on my next one.